3 in our regular Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, October 24th. Ms. Harrington, please let the record show that all board members are present. And Chief Communications Officer, Mr. Hall, will introduce students to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening, board members. Last week, Springfield Public Schools celebrated the expansion of agriculture education as Glendale High School completed its chartering ceremony to form a new FFA chapter. Students may now participate in FFA at both Glendale and Hillcrest High Schools. With us tonight is the officer from the Glendale FFA chapter, Cameron Allwine. Would you please come forward, Cameron? Cameron Allwine is the secretary of the Glendale FFA chapter. Cameron is a Glendale senior who plans to attend college after graduation to study either fashion design or agriculture. If you are a part of one of the new FFA chapters within Springfield Public Schools, or if you're here to support Cameron, please stand so that we may honor you as well, or anyone from Glendale. Now we invite everyone who's able to stand to please do so and join us. And Cameron, whenever you're ready, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here. Well done, thank you. We'll continue now with our Honoring Excellence for this evening, and we begin our recognition tonight by honoring a long history of excellence in broadcast journalism at Hillcrest High School. 34 years ago, Dave Davis, who at that time was an English teacher and a baseball coach, offered the first broadcast journalism course, which produced a monthly news magazine called HTV Magazine. Dave is here tonight, accompanied by some of his students. Dave, would you please come forward along with HTV staffers, Halen Baker, Shelby Epperly, Audrey Holmes, Kaylee Jasper, Holton Pyle, and Bradley Moore. Would you please come forward? I get to brag on you just a little bit more here. Great group with us this evening. Since starting HTV, Dave has led students to win 15 Broadcast Pacemaker Awards and 10 Robert F. Kennedy High School Journalism Awards. Both of these are national records for a high school. In light of his proven record of broadcast journalism excellence, Mr. Davis was recently honored by the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences with the Mid-America Emmy Silver Circle Award. In addition to teaching at Hillcrest High School for 41 years, Mr. Davis helped create the Student Television Network and is the host and director of a national workshop for scholastic broadcast teachers. Most recently, HTV Magazine won 3 first-placed student production awards with the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Mid-America Foundation. Congratulations to Mr. Davis and all of these remarkable students.
I got a few scores to settle here now. It's going to take a while. No, thank you very much for having us here. We had a couple people that couldn't be here, but we're happy that we are here, and it's been quite a ride, and it makes it worth it to see the students get some recognition. And unfortunately, I got some this time, which was had to buy a suit and give a little talk. But we have had Hillcrest has had an amazing run of success with this class, and I don't know how much in the future I'll be around, but I think it'll be in good hands when I do head out once and for all. And but some of these guys I'll probably have a hard time forgetting. So anyway, thank you for all of this.
Thank you.
And while we get ready for that post photo, just want to note as well that those who were in attendance at our Hall of Fame earlier this month also saw the Hillcrest broadcast journalism legacy live out in the induction of Daniel Arnall from MSNBC in our SPS Hall of Fame, who got his start at Hillcrest. So it's great to see that legacy continue in so many ways. Thank you.
Named our show.
That's awesome. And he
First
named
year.
it.
He
That's
named
great.
it.
Congratulations again, Team Hillcrest, and we'll now continue to honor excellence with our distinguished principals. 2 of our high school leaders were recently honored by the Missouri Association of Secondary School Principals for their outstanding leadership. Jeremy Brown and Robin Collins, will you both please come forward? Jeremy is principal at Central High School, and he was named the Southwest Region Principal of the Year. Robin, who is assistant principal at Hillcrest High School, was recognized as the Southwest Region Assistant Principal of the Year. They were both recognized at the MOASP conference earlier this month. Please join us in congratulating them both. Also joining us this evening are several SPS employees celebrating 25 and 30 years of service excellence to our students. This continues a tradition during the fall Board of Education meetings where we recognize milestone service anniversaries. The first employee we'll recognize tonight has served SPS for 30 years. David Miller, will you please come forward? Mr. Miller is a science teacher at Parkview High School. He began his career with SPS as a science teacher at Central High School. So please join us in thanking David Miller for his dedicated service to SPS, and we'll take a photo with Dr. Lathan and Ms. Kincaid. Thank you. Congratulations. Our next honorees have been employed by SPS for 25 years. Please come forward as we call your name. We have Jeannie Barge, Stephanie Candy, we have Gary Kepi, Carla Owen, and Davey Walker. So first, we'll start with Jeannie Barge. Jeannie is a reading interventionist at Boyd Elementary School. All right. And Dr. Lathan, and he'll come forward. We'll take photos. And Ms. Kincaid, please, as well. We'll take an individual photo with each employee. Congratulations, Jeannie. Next, we have Stephanie Candy. Stephanie is a Title I math teacher at Williams Elementary School. Congratulations, Stephanie. Next, we have Gary Kepi. Gary is an occupational and assistive technology therapist in our special education department. again with 25 years of service. Congratulations, Gary. Next, with 25 years of service, we have Carla Owen, who is an educational interpreter at Holland Elementary School. 25 years. Congratulations, Carla. And lastly, we have Davy Walker, a custodian at Gray Elementary School. Congratulations on 25 years. Okay. One more big round of applause for this great group, 25 years of service. And we'll look forward to honoring additional SPS employees who are celebrating service milestones during our November board meeting. Finally, tonight we have our most valuable player recognition for this month. In celebration of our SPS United theme, we're pleased to honor the October Most Valuable Player. This recognition reminds us that teamwork and a collective vision can positively impact SPS students and staff. Tonight's MVP helps prepare her Pleasant View Middle School students to be success ready by regularly analyzing student achievement data and reinforcing concepts that students may need extra help with. This results in outstanding student engagement in her classroom. Let's watch this video to learn more about our MVP, Rebecca Wilkins.
My name is Rebecca Wilkins. I am the 8th grade English teacher out at Pleasant View Middle School.
One of the things I noticed immediately when we hired her on is that she's very data driven. She looks at all of her scores. She will pull small groups and go over what questions they have or what she knows that they're not getting.
I think that the standard here at Pleasant View Middle School is that you show up, you work hard after school, you do what needs to be done. Because that was the culture and the atmosphere that I walked into with my colleagues. It was really easy to just join that.
She builds amazing relationships with her kids. She is a very fast-paced, gregarious, outspoken.
So my teaching style is student-centered. I believe that you treat kids the way you want to be treated. I'm all about the kid. I like to joke around. I like to have fun. Middle schoolers are a different breed, and I love it because they are excited and they show up every day. They want to be noticed.
She constantly tells kids what they need to know to get ready in life and why she makes it really relevant for them, why it is important to know these skills, because it's a skill set that they're going to use as they're getting older.
I am elevating myself so I can elevate students and make them success ready, because that's our whole goal. We have a lot of initiatives that have changed this year that have all moved towards creating these students so they can be successful. So I guess it's just, how do I challenge myself to elevate more?
You know, she's just an extraordinary lady, and we're blessed to have her.
Ms. Wilkins, will you please come forward so we may recognize you as our MVP? Is there anything you want to say, Ms. Wilkins?
I was going that way. I was this close. No, I just appreciate it. At our school, we have several teachers like me. I am one of many. I promise you, I'm not special. Pleasant View is just a great place to work with a lot of really caring educators. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Rebecca, and that concludes Honoring Excellence for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2.04, approval of the agenda. Our next, our recommended action is that the board approve the agenda as presented. Do I have a motion?
I make that motion.
Okay, motion from Board Member McCoskey, second from Board Member Thomas Tate. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. Everybody vote?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Who are we waiting on? Have you voted?
Yeah, just have to log back on.
Oh, okay.
Let me out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the motion to approve the agenda passes 7-0. Moving on to item 3.01, public comments. The Board of Education welcomes comments about the issues being discussed. The board uses this time in our meeting to listen to the public, but will not comment or engage with the public during this meeting. The board allows for up to 10 speakers per public comment period. The board chair will call on individuals in the order in which they signed up. Substitutions are not permitted. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and will be timed by the board secretary, which will appear on the screens in the room. Comments must be acceptable for a business and family-friendly environment. Inappropriate language, gestures, or personal attacks will not be tolerated. It's inappropriate to address the board about individual students or individual staff members by name in open meetings. If you have concerns about these individuals, the concerns should be addressed to the appropriate administrative supervisors, either in the school or with the district office. If you have materials you want to share, please place them in the tray on the podium, and they'll be distributed to the board members following the meeting. Our first speaker this night is Kat Trussler.
Hello. Last year, I asked for clarification of board policy GBCB after the removal of pride flags at Kickapoo. I focused on this because I work in business controls. All day long, I review policies and procedures for operational, financial, and reputational risk and ensure that they meet legal obligations. Additionally, I hold certification in regulatory compliance. Tonight, I'm here again to talk to you about board policy. While watching the previous meeting as a professional and tax-paying parent of Springfield Public Schools, I couldn't decide if I was more embarrassed or outraged that you would willingly gamble with funds meant for our most vulnerable students. The absolute audacity and hubris of deciding to ignore legal counsel to follow USDA guidelines was shocking. So let's review some of the statements made. That the USDA might just send a nasty letter. No, they can and will pull funding or implement fines. The Code of Federal Regulations lists that a school can be fined for knowingly disregarding a USDA program requirement, and your statements are publicly available online and evidence that you knew and chose to not comply. It was mentioned that you couldn't imagine that they would take our little district $7 million, but perhaps you should speak to the school in Florida, who told the USDA in 2022 that they would not comply and were told they did not have to participate in the program and began to withdraw their funding. But Grant Park Christian Academy is a private school and granted a religious exception to keep their $78,000. Public schools are not available for religious exceptions. The lawsuit wherein 22 states sued the USDA was mentioned, but you should have looked harder because that case was dismissed with prejudice, and all 22 states now have the correct non-discrimination language on their websites. Even Missouri, because I went and checked all 22 websites. Since the meeting, a comment was made on a radio show by one of our board members that it is not law, and then some other incorrect information about how our government works. which is interesting because as a former director of compliance, you should know Congress creates federal agencies and gives them authority. They interpret the law, create regulations based on their enabled powers, and enforce via their guidelines. This update has the backing of the judicial branch and the executive branch, and to amend Title IX to exclude gender would take 2/3 of both the House and the Senate, which the House can't even get a simple majority right now, so I don't think that that's going to happen. This isn't going to change, and this isn't about your personal beliefs. This is about federal regulation. The U.S. Department of Education will be releasing their updates soon, which also includes this expanded definition. You are also in violation of your own board policy BF, which states you will ensure compliance with current state and federal regulations. You have another chance tonight to fix it, so show us you will make the right decision.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carrie Wells.
Good evening. Tonight at 5:10, the Attorney General of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, issued a letter to the Springfield Public Schools. It says, "Dear Dr. Lathan, it has come to my attention that the Springfield Public School Board of Education is scheduled to vote on a policy revision this evening that would adopt incorrect guidance received from the United States Department of Agriculture. According to public statements, there is concern among some members of the school board that failure to adopt this policy could put up to $7 million of free and reduced lunch funding for kids in Springfield at risk. It is clear that the Biden administration is willing to threaten school children and use them as pawns in its wider culture war. I am here to say that such divisiveness and fear-mongering has no place in our state. Even the suggestion that a child be denied a school lunch based on any classification of race, religion, national origin, or sex is absurd. Yet federal bureaucrats at the USDA are apparently willing to engage in such tactics of fear and manipulation to arrive at this desired outcome. My office recently sued the USDA over the policy in federal court. In that case, the court clarified that the prohibition against sex-based discrimination under SNAP is not a command to enact any policy or regulation, Tennessee versus United States Department of Agriculture. Therefore, the published USDA guidance does not command that school districts adopt a policy or redefine sex to include gender identity or sexual orientation. The Biden administration is basing its flawed guidance on a threat that in order for schools to feed their children, they must require a radical ideology. With its current guidance, the USDA misinterprets the decision by the United States Supreme Court in Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia. In Bostock, the issue before the court was wrongful termination of an employee, not school lunches. In fact, the Supreme Court went out of its way to limit its holding, responding specifically to those who worry that our decisions will sweep beyond Title VII to other federal or state laws that prohibit sex discrimination. Bostock versus Clay County, Georgia. The Supreme Court rejected attempts to use its holding for other purposes, further stating, but none of these other laws are before us. We have not had the benefit of adversarial testing about the meaning of their terms, and we do not prejudge any such question today. Under Title VII, too, we do not purport to address bathrooms, locker rooms, or anything else.
Thank you, Carrie. Your
of the
time has
kind.
elapsed. Our next speaker is Danny. Please remind me how to pronounce your last name. Thank you.
All right. Good evening. I'm Daniel Lazio with Promo, Missouri. Welcome back to the board president. Glad to have your presence today to address a matter of paramount importance, the inclusion of sexual orientation and gender identity within SPS's non-discrimination policy. This is not a matter of legal compliance, political correctness, or moral imperative, but a practical necessity that directly affects our financial stability and our commitment to fostering a safe and inclusive environment for all students and staff. First and foremost, it is essential to recognize that discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity is a prevalent issue. Many members of the LGBTQ+ community continue to face intolerance, bias, and even violence in society. School should be a sanctuary where all students feel safe, respected, and valued regardless of who they are. Inclusion and non-discrimination are fundamental principles of equitable education system. Excluding individuals based on who they are is inherently unfair and counter to the values we uphold as educators and public servants. We have a responsibility to nourish the academic and emotional and social well-being of every student, and excluding some students from the policy is a failure to fulfill this responsibility. By extending the policy, we send a powerful message to our students that we value and respect who they are. We create an environment where all students can focus on their education without the constant fear of being targeted or ostracized. And it's been said many times in these meetings, research has consistently shown that students who feel accepted and included at school are much more likely to perform better academically, have higher self-esteem, and experience improved mental health. Extending SBS's non-discrimination policy is also a legal necessity. Many states and regions have already recognized this, and federal guidance supports the protection of LGBTQ+ individuals. Failing to comply with these legal standards can result in legal challenges and jeopardize our funding, creating a financial burden that does divert resources from education of our students. Moreover, not updating the policy puts the school at risk of losing the free and reduced lunch program, which currently 53% of students qualify for this program, and they depend on these meals for daily nutrition. Losing this crucial support could undermine the overall well-being of students and have a detrimental impact on their ability to learn effectively. Furthermore, this commitment to non-discrimination is consistent with our broader societal values. As society becomes more diverse and accepting, we must reflect these values within our educational institutions. By implementing these policies, we prepare our students for the diverse and inclusive world they will encounter beyond these school doors. So I implore you to recognize the urgency of this matter and pass the non-discrimination policy to include sexual orientation and gender identity. By doing so, you're doing an actionable commitment of providing an excellent education for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Laura Mullins.
I'm here this evening to address significant concerns regarding the administration's ability to abide by Board Policy JG that states it is essential that the district maintain a safe school environment and a climate that allows all students in the class to learn. This is simply not occurring. Policy JG goes on to say the Board of Education will provide a discipline code to support this goal. Throughout the day across our district, students are allowed to consistently violate this code without consequence, not only putting students and staff at risk, but also eliminating any chance at a successful learning environment. The effects of this are seen on a regular basis. Teachers and staff get black eyes, cussed out, spit on, broken bones, and the list goes on. It should not be a surprise that we continue to have record number of teachers breaking their contracts with SPS and an inability to convince our much-needed hourly support staff to want to stay. Would you put up with this for minimal compensation and inconsistent pay? The unsafe culture that has been created also impacts our students. Disruptive and violent students have learned there are little to no consequences for these behaviors. So when they are allowed to return to their classroom, sometimes within minutes, instruction all but stops. This vicious cycle has a secondary effect, the underlying feeling that school is not a safe place. All of this impacts a child's ability to learn. The problem is rooted in inconsistency. When a student violates the code, the first stop is to the building's minors and majors sheet. This sheet divides the infractions into two categories, ones that warrant a discipline referral and those in which students are given almost unlimited opportunities to repeat infractions before the code of conduct is even considered. For example, at one site, physical aggression, defiance, disrespect, disruptive behavior, inappropriate language and gestures, and many more are allowed up to 3 times a week before a teacher is allowed to complete a discipline referral. Once these do arrive at the code of conduct, it's considered a first offense and often results in no more than a documented principal conference. When compared to surrounding districts, it's clear SPS is not prioritizing safety. The document I shared with you clearly identifies the vast differences in responses. Board Policy JG states the code of conduct is to be shared publicly. As I notified you over 2 weeks ago, I was provided an alternate document marked for internal use only that was shared with limited staff. In this document, students are allowed to receive additional infractions before reaching the maximum consequence in the code, or on certain infractions, never do. I did email the district to ask about the thought process behind this document, as a few of you asked me to do. I have provided a copy of that email here, and as I told you what happened, I received no response. Anyone who watches the BOE meetings can see from the amount of time spent through public comments and board discussions, there is great concern on how to best protect our students. Perhaps we should start by enforcing the protective policies we already have in place. Without a quick and direct response from this board, there is little chance SPS will be able to turn around our academic challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. John Vaughn. Our next speaker is Dr. John Vaughn.
I'm Dr. John Vaughn. I'm past president of the American Society for Church Growth. My academic degrees are in history, sociology, and theology. I've been quoted by most major research and published sources in the U.S. and many around the world, including the White House, Harvard, Princeton, USC, other universities, and other places. I'm here as a part of the concerned pastors of the greater Springfield area. But I want to ask, first of all, you to help us out. And Claudette would probably be the source to go ahead and give it to. I learned this week that Ozark, the students, their primary language, that represent 18 different languages in the Ozark system. And I would like to know what that currently looks like in our system. What are those languages currently? And also, say back in 2020, what was it then and how has that changed over this period of time? That'd be really quite interesting. But Claudette, I think, would be the natural person for that, to get that. I also would concur with what we've heard so far. I think we should stick with state law and let this be wrestled out between the state and between the Department of Agriculture. Because if we just play dead on this thing, Department of Education is next, and we know where that's going to lead us. Okay? Education can be very complex. So like a Rubik's Cube. And probably most people who've ever had one of these never got it worked. And that's been the challenge. Everybody who knows the Rubik's Cube knows that there's one part that does not move. And it's the key to solving the Rubik's Cube. It's the centerpiece. It never moves. So whether it's history or math or government or whatever the area of education is, we can change those and we can manipulate those, but we have to always come back to the core. Once you begin to make changes in the system and you get away from the core, with the Rubik's Cube, there are 42 quadrillion dead-end streets that will prevent you from ever getting back to solving this cube. You have to come back to the core. Any educated person in this room can go back to primary documents and know that the Judeo-Christian foundation is what established this nation in education, and the Bible had a major role in being a textbook in those days. So to get back, if you form a cross on the Rubik's Cube, you can get back to the core and you can get back to what you began with. But you start messing with the mechanics of it and you get away from the core, bad things happen. Thank you much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carl Hurd. You're up, Carl.
Good evening. At 4 o'clock this morning, I was awake, really praying whether I should make this presentation. Right or wrong, here goes. And this is going to be the generic version. I signed up to speak on enrollment and absenteeism. So here's what happened. On October the 9th, 23, I submitted a sunshine request, 6 points dealing with enrollment and absenteeism. On October the 12th, I received a reply. It would take 2 hours to research this and cost $50.44. On Friday, I submitted a check for $50.44, my own hard-earned money. Since that time, this district has 60 hours of working time, 8 hours per day, and I have not got a response about the sunshine request. Yesterday, I asked to speak to a communications person via a secretary. To date, I have not received a response. A simple telephone call would have been appreciated. When can I expect to receive this sunshine request? I am resolved not to make any judgments, but leave that to you, the school board. Communication is the key. Related to this is a statement made at a board retreat at the New York Elementary. This statement was in effect, SBS will evaluate every position to see if it is justified. If it is not justified, it will be eliminated. So what happened? At the 23-24 budget, 50 to 51 employees were added. I believe there's plenty of employees that could have done the sunshine request. When it's time to evaluate SBS, might put this down as a footnote. And in the meantime, I am impatiently waiting a response to the sunshine request. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brittany Dyer.
Hello, board members. I must have watched the September 26th board meeting about 5 times in a row, thinking I must have missed something. There is no way this vote just went to no. My brain could not even begin to understand why the board would even consider gambling $7.5 million in USDA grants in over 2 inclusive sentences. And to be honest with you, I've listened to these comments tonight, and I'm still thoroughly confused, because I'm not sure what the issue is. Because just 2 months ago, we asked you to make a statement of support for the LGBTQ+ community, as we've done for almost a year. You said you wouldn't even take it to a vote because you support, quote, all students. If you support all students, and we already say we support all students, what is the hang-up? Like, I am so lost on why you would consider risking meals for last year, 57% of our population. I think Danny mentioned it was still over 50% of our student body population. Here in the Ozarks, according to the Ozarks Food Harvest, 1 in 5 children here in our area struggle with food insecurities. 1 in 5. Now, can you imagine just taking this crowd behind me, taking 20% of them and telling them, you know what, you don't need to eat this week, but them actually being children? Because that's what you're saying. Instead of adopting our own policy, which we should already be supporting based off of your own words, it shouldn't be an issue. We should just add this in there, and it wouldn't even be a conversation. But we're wasting even more of my time, y'all's time, which is incredibly important, our community's time, up here asking you for something that should have been done September 26th. You have weaponized your hate for one community to attack other marginalized communities, and we see that through and through and through. The sad thing is, we've seen several board members that have repeatedly shown that they will put personal politics over students of this district every single time. We hear you, how you talk about myself, other advocates, parents, our students that are LGBTQ on your conservative radio shows and on Fox News. But the sad thing is, it's not just the adults who hear that conversation, it's all of the students too. Like my 7-year-old son who's sitting back there. And not to mention all of the other adults and all of the other teenagers. Have you thought for 5 seconds about what that hateful message that you are spewing on public radio is doing to them? When I sit here and I tell you that 1 in 5 LGBTQ plus students struggles with suicidal thoughts and ideation, you still go on public radios and make these comments. This is simple. You said your own words, we support every student in our district. Why are we even talking about this? Add in the 2 sentences, show us that you mean what you say, follow your own policy and guidelines that you set in place earlier this year, and please, for the love of God, make sure that we do not lose $7.5 million to feed 14,000 Title I students in our district. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Kyler Sherman Wilkins.
Good evening and welcome back to the President of the Board. My name is Kyler Sherman Wilkins. I am a college professor, public educator, and a strong advocate for public schools. And I do want to note that though I'm employed by Missouri State University, I do not speak for the university. My words are my own. I want to start by saying I cannot for the life of me imagine being so full of hate and bigotry that I would vote to risk losing $7.5 million in federal funding needed to provide meals to hungry children. And yet here we are. Over 40% of our board decided that their fear of sexual orientation and gender identity trumped their duty to uphold and stand by federal policy. Perhaps neither these board members nor their children know what it's like to rely on these meals. But fact is, you don't have to. All you have to do is have empathy, which is very apparent that some members of this board simply lack. This action, along with other votes and behavior and rhetoric, are further evidence that, in my view, these folks are simply unqualified to serve in positions of power as it pertains to our public schools. Now, zooming out, what we are seeing here is a continued waging of culture war on school boards. Right-wing activists and ideologues are working tirelessly to undermine our public schools, disempower our teachers and education experts, while causing harm and attempting to erase the experiences of our most marginalized and vulnerable students. Playing footsie with Moms for Liberty, an extremist group, proposals to ban safe zone stickers, the insane fixation on CRT, which they cannot define, by the way, and attacking private citizens during public comments in our conservative talk radio is simply unbecoming and disqualifying. We as a community must reject this extremism. We cannot allow far-right ideologues with limited understanding of public schools and education to set public school policy. We need a return to normalcy. We need a board in which the community fears not violation of federal regulations because of board members' transphobia. We need a board comprised of folks who are committed to the business of public schooling and not interested in cosplaying as partisan politicians. If you are more interested in these partisan ideological games, I suggest that you resign from the board and run for Congress, where this partisan silliness is the norm. Our district deserves so much better. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Thomas Hunt.
Hello, my name is Thomas Hunt. I'm a parent of Springfield. I'm a parent of children in Springfield Public Schools, a patriotic American, an Eagle Scout, and I have lived in Springfield for most of my life. I saw that at the last school board meeting, the board had a split vote on the subject of whether or not to add gender identity and sexual orientation to the anti-discrimination policy regarding school lunches as required by the USDA. For those of you who voted in favor of amending the policy, I thank you for your vote, and I appreciate your decision. For those of you who voted against amending this policy, I have to admit that I do not understand your actions. Half the students attending Springfield Public Schools are on free or reduced lunch, and a refusal to amend the policy puts the funding we receive for that program at risk. For a number of these children, a school lunch is the only meal they will get some days. I do not see how any person of conscience would prefer to let a child go hungry than to make a simple decision to comply with the law. Making the amendment does not require you to like gay or transgender people. Making the amendment does not require you to accept their lifestyle as morally correct. All it says is that our students will be fed regardless of their identity or choices. This should not be controversial. You are free to do as you wish, but please think of the children in our district, and please vote to amend the policy. I need say no more. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment period of our board meeting. Moving on to our consent agenda items, items 4.01 through 7.01, which includes the minutes from last board meeting, transportation routes, KCOB reports, and personnel reports. These have been sent to the board members, and we've had an opportunity to ask questions. At this time, I will entertain a motion that the board approve consent agenda items 4.01 through 7.01. Motion from Member Thomas Tate. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Second from Member Makowski. This time we will vote.
I have a question.
Okay.
Are we, this is the
Typically on
allotted time
consent agenda items, there isn't any discussion. If there's discussion, we would need to remove it from consent agenda, but
That's not true. Point of order.
on consent agenda, there's typically not discussion. That's why it's on consent. I know historically.
Not a discussion, it's a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I have, Dr. Lathan? I am wondering about the transportation routes. As far as transportation is concerned, from a strategic standpoint, are we still working towards a two-tier busing schedule? I know that we get updates on employees, and I'm very happy to see that we continue to increase our workforce. But I'm just looking in terms of, we reduced our radius, and then unfortunately we had to expand it back out, and we went to a three-tier system. And I'm just wondering where we sit with that.
Thank you for that question. This item, like I said, is just our normal transportation routes. We are working and have analyzed the options around two-tier versus three-tier, and the staff is finalizing some information. And so I'll be sharing some information with the board within the next 2 weeks, and I'll be providing an update.
Thank you.
It doesn't look good financially and driver-wise to go to a two-tier. I will go ahead and put it out there, but we have some information as it relates to summarizing the pros and the cons. So
That's
I will
very
share that information with you. It's coming.
Helpful, thank you.
Okay. At this time, we'll move to a vote on consent agenda items 4.01 through 7.01. The motion that the board approve consent agenda items is approved, 7-0. Moving on to item 8.01, Treasurer's Report. Dr. Shaw is here with us tonight.
Good evening. I'm pleased to present the Treasurer's Report this evening. The standard forms and reports are in your packet. The Budget Amendment and Transfer Report does represent a continuing fund balance of 26.32%, so maintaining where we've been recently in the past few months. As a reminder, Kara Stasel and her team are continuing to work with our auditors, Westbrook and Company, as they perform field work around the audit that will take place, continue over the next couple of months, and we'll be bringing you the formal presentation at the December 19th board meeting. So if there's any questions you have around the Treasurer's Report, I'll be happy to try to answer those for you.
Any questions at this time for Dr. Shaw? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion that the board approve the Treasurer's Report as presented.
I make a motion that we approve the Treasurer's Report as reported.
Thank you. Board Member Makowski made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, second from Board Member Thomas Tate. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. Okay, the motion that the board approve the treasurer report as presented passes 7-0. Moving on to agenda item number 9, board policy. There are 3 policies on the agenda for a vote. 2 of these policies were brought forward at the September 12th study session and the September 26th regular meeting. Board members have had time to review these policies and ask questions regarding these policies. As a reminder, these policies were brought forward by MSBA with recommended adjustments based on legislation and change in statute. The third policy, Board Policy GDBA, is being brought forward to reflect support staff pay guidelines in adherence to the Fair Labor Standard Act. First item is 9.01, Board Policy AC. This time I will entertain a motion that the board adopt the policy as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion from Board Member Thomas Tate. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Board Member Bruner. Any discussion on Board Policy AC?
I do, Madam President.
Yes.
If you could bear with me, please, when I go through this. I have prepared here a statement regarding this policy. I cannot support this language for several reasons. This language is not law. I repeat, not law, and therefore cannot and should not be disguised as law, as defined under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The President of the United States is playing politics and political ideology with vulnerable kids' lunches. The USDA has placed this language within its regulations illegally. I read from a letter from the United States Senate to the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, and I'm going to read a couple paragraphs from that. The senators who addressed this with the Secretary of Agriculture, the definition of sex is perhaps one of the most divisive issues affecting American culture today. It is unconscionable that an unelected federal agency would wade into this debate by holding hostage funding of schools' meals. Moreover, the purpose of these programs is to feed children. It is in no way should this funding be contingent upon local school practices that are wholly irrelevant to that purpose. Millions of parents do not want their children to be taught ideological positions on sex that contradict their religious or ethical values. This guidance threatens to target and punish schools that seek to protect the safety of their students by offering sex-segregated bathrooms and athletic programs. On the other hand, it would reward schools that pursue gender-affirming policies, which have been used to undermine parental rights and resulted in degraded school safety, particularly for young girls. Some schools have kept parents in the dark regarding their children's decisions to pursue untested and often irreversible drug regimens and surgeries. Similarly, some courts, with cooperation from the schools, have treated parental disapproval of cross-sex hormone therapy as tantamount to child abuse. The USDA's guidance is a clear attempt to bully good Americans into accepting beliefs regarding sex and gender with which they disagree. If implemented, children who rely on USDA school meal programs could go hungry as a result of losing access to free or reduced meals. Now, this is signed by Senator Michael Lee, Roger Marshall, Ted Cruz, Mike Braun, Roger Whitaker, Mike Crapo, Marsha Blackburn, James Reich, Josh Hawley, and Cindy Hyde-Smith. I have a copy for each and every one of the board members in regards to this letter from the United States Senate addressing this specific issue. I read a quote from an article by KZRG News, July 26 of 2022 by Ty Albright. The USDA's guidance is unlawful because it was issued without providing the state and other stakeholders the opportunity for input as required by Administrative Procedures Act. The USD premised its guidance on an obvious misreading and misapplication of the Supreme Court's holding in Bostock versus Clayton County. The guidance imposes new and unlawful regulatory measures on the state agencies and operators receiving federal finance assistance from the USDA. This will inevitably result in regulatory chaos that threatens essential nutritional service to some of the most vulnerable citizens, unquote. In reference to the 2020 Supreme Court case, Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia, that case was not to discriminate against these people identifying over one's sexual orientation and gender identity for the purposes of employment only. It was then the Biden administration hijacked this language to institute it as law within every department under the administration. It is not the executive branch of our government that makes law, it's Congress that makes law. Let me say this. I personally do not have any objections to adults choosing whatever lifestyle that they want. It's the children that I'm concerned about. You see, children don't know any better. All children are vulnerable. And when adults begin to adopt language like this, it's the adults that are leading the children. We are saying it's okay when it's not. This language, shoji, simply encourages children to make decisions in their life they are not equipped to make. Some will unfortunately contemplate suicide, and some will commit suicide. Children will be guided to have medical interventions such as having breast removal or chemically castrated, treated with puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. It is humanly impossible to change one's sex. Our Lord God, our Creator, made you to be a man or a woman, boy or a girl. It is impossible to change that. Our Lord has placed us here to take care of our children, and taking them down this path is immoral. I vote against adding shoji to this policy.
Thank you, Board Member Mikowski. We're not going to do that. Other board members will be making other comments. And if that happens again, we'll clear the room and continue our business meeting. Thank you, Board Member Mikowski. Are there other board members who wish to make comments at this time?
Sure, I have a couple questions. One of our speakers mentioned a letter from the Attorney General of Missouri, email sent at 5:10 to the district. I checked my email and didn't receive anything. Is that something that the district has received?
I received a copy of it. I was handed it as we walked into the boardroom.
Then can I
I don't think it went to the, I'm going into my email now.
can I
He read the letter.
Can we take time to finish that
that's
letter?
what I was gonna ask. Can I motion or move to each of us taking a 10-minute break so that we can each read a copy of that? I guess that's a formal motion.
There's been a motion for a 10-minute recess.
I'll second the motion.
There's been a second.
Including each of us receiving a copy of that letter.
You didn't receive it. It was sent to me. But I'll make you a copy.
That's what I'm saying. Each of us receive a copy of it, take a 10-minute recess for review, come back and pick up where we left off.
There's been a motion for a 10-minute recess along with a second. This time we'll do a verbal vote.
Vote now. Aye.
No. Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. We will reconvene at 6:44 p.m. We will come back to our meeting. Board Member Byrne, you had the floor.
At this time, I don't have any further questions or comments. Thanks.
Are there any other comments, questions, discussion from other board members? Yes.
I have a question. I remain perplexed how these two policies came back to us for another vote. And I'd like to understand how this happened so that we can move forward with other business. According to our board ethics policy, while we may disagree, we honor the decision when the board has spoken, and that happens when a quorum gathers and a vote is taken. And that happened in September. I don't want to rely on the news media, so I need to ask, and as having served in a board leadership position, I know that when we show up to the agenda-setting meeting, the agenda is presented by Dr. Lathan with a tentative board layout. Were these policies on that tentative agenda, or were they added at your request?
I had asked for them to be added prior to the agenda-setting meeting. I don't know at what point the tentative agenda was set, but I had made that request.
Okay. Can you weigh in on that, Mr. Kreis?
I'm sorry?
Can you weigh in on that?
No, I agree with,
Yeah, but I also don't want to get off track, so I'll let you finish.
I'd like to.
All I know, it was on the agenda we received.
Just turn on your microphone. Thank you.
All I know was what President Kincaid said. It was on the tentative agenda we received on Monday morning when we reviewed the agenda.
Okay, and that was at the board president's directive?
It was, but I'll let you finish and then I'll respond.
Well, I'd like to, when you do respond, I'm trying to understand how this impacts our board norms and our board policy. I'd like to get some clarity around, can other board members in the future ask for a revote if a member is absent, or if they feel that the circumstances have changed in some manner? So that's the question I had. I do have a couple comments.
I'll let you finish, because I'm keeping track with Robert's Rules of Order, the 10-minute time frame, so I'll let you finish your statement.
Okay. Well, I don't fear sexual orientation and gender identity. And it's getting tiresome listening to the many accusations that are wrongfully levied upon my character. I can only speak for myself. These policies have nothing to do with adults and their employment or their work conditions. They are solely about children. And I do personally believe that the innocence of children must be protected at all cost. Moving forward, I want to be crystal clear that there should be zero discrimination in any form for any reason on any of our campuses. That means the students of SPS have access to free and reduced lunch based on family eligibility, and that alone. These policies, I don't see them as having anything to do with acceptance or inclusivity. I want to be clear that our federal funds are not in jeopardy. There is simply no precedent. I heard the speaker refer to a Florida case, and I will be looking for that and studying that, but to my knowledge, it has never been done. It didn't work when former President Trump went to withhold federal law enforcement funds from sanctuary cities. I've heard the word gambling used repeatedly tonight and previously by media. And so I think it's important to address that. Nobody is gambling with students' lunch money, and to suggest it is pure fabrication, to sensationalize a narrative and to stir up a frenzy. And I agree that this does amount to fear-mongering. What we are gambling and what is in jeopardy is the quality of education that students receive in our district and that their parents expect. Because this board is choosing to focus on this conversation rather than on policies that directly impact our classrooms, such as discipline, curriculum, and above all, the safety of our students. I want to see us focusing on and talking about our workforce and how we can provide them with the tools and the safe environment that they need to teach students. In the last meeting, I didn't have board support to push the policies back to MSBA to get a general policy position having to do with following the law. And now it appears to me that the validity of the USDA edict as law is in question, and assuming if it were law, it can be changed and it can be revised. So I see it as being much more efficient to not get bogged down chasing laws with district level policies and spend our policy currency on what directly affects our classrooms, on policies that ensure the safety of our students, the safety of our staff, and help our staff perform better and our students achieve more. But here we are talking about these policies again, so I'll state my position. I'd originally voted no in September because I saw this policy as a gateway to the emotionally charged conversations, as Board Member Bruner had mentioned, that would revolve around locker rooms and such. And I was looking to stave off divisive policies that would indeed polarize the community. They would overstep the parents and ultimately harm our students. But today, I cannot support it, because I do not want to put us in a policy lawsuit. I don't want to see us get sued for having an illegal policy, which, unlike withholding of the federal dollars, is a real possibility since we are currently still in a lawsuit with the AG. So I really would like to wait and see where this goes legally. I don't understand what the rush is. I've been told that in the United States Senate, there will be, and I just received this, I'm happy to share it with you all, a vote on the floor that pertains to the USDA edict. I also think that we should share all this information that we are receiving, including the letter we received tonight, with Missouri School Board Association, and have them take another look. And that begs the question, how and why did MSBA advance on this? They essentially put the cart ahead of the horse. I'm beginning to wonder if they're being coerced into taking something that is questionable as law and adopting it as policy to sidestep the legality of the policy. Who's doing this? And I do feel that as a board, I'd like to put a motion to table this.
I still have a comment to make.
There has been a motion
Second.
to table and a second from Board Member Byrne. Is there any discussion on the motion to table policy, a vote on board policy AC?
Yeah, I have discussion because every board member hasn't had the opportunity to speak.
Okay. So there is a motion to table, keeping in mind Board Member Thomas Tate disagrees with the motion because not every board member has had an opportunity to.
I will rescind that motion for the time being.
Okay, motion's been rescinded. Any further comments at this time, Board
No.
Member Mohammed Khani? Okay.
I just want to start by saying that the school board is supposed to be a nonpartisan board. And I have been really dismayed at the level of politics that are continuously being pushed by the school board. And we have become more and more partisan in our decision-making, and it's disturbing because we are supposed to be a nonpartisan board that makes decisions that are best for our children. It was stated in the last meeting that by a board member that they didn't want to vote yes on this policy because they didn't want the federal government telling them what to do or having control or something to that effect. We're not here to make those kind of decisions. Take that to the senators. Let these folks who have these letters and these letterheads, let them be the people who deal with that. And if you have concerns about how our federal government or state government are being run for those offices. Here in this district, as stated by Dr. Mohammed Khani, we should be focusing on policies that deal with the classroom. This one does not. And to suggest that it's going to harm our children to add this language to this policy that only puts us in compliance with the USDA, whether or not it's law or policy, it puts us in compliance. We need their money in order to feed our students. I heard on a talk radio show saying, well, we don't need their money. Yes, we do, because the community is not going to feed them. This board is not going to feed them. And we need to have this money from the USDA in order to continue to feed our students, half of this kids in this district. We are focusing on this policy because it has been made a political issue rather than a policy issue that deals with feeding our students. This is not something that's going into the classroom. This is something that is about us being in compliance in order to get funding to feed our students. Now, if this board wants to raise money that's going to equal that amount of money that we're going to forfeit, that we're willing to forfeit because we don't like the way that the federal, as has been mentioned over and over again, that Biden's administration is moving forward, then let's raise the money to do that then. I don't see that happening, and until that happens, we need that money, and all we're doing is adding language to a policy that will not be taught in the classrooms. This is not classroom curriculum. This is policy that guides how we run this district, and that's what we should be focusing on. So while we're spending all this time on this, we're spending on this because it is so important that we continue to have these dollars in order to meet the needs of our students, and feeding them is part of meeting their needs. Kids can't learn when they're hungry.
Thank you. Any further discussion from board members?
I have something. To me, this is a compliance issue. Simply, a compliance issue. I honestly may be the only person up at this table that has ever experienced a federal audit, and no, it wasn't with the IRS, okay? That wasn't it. As an employee, I experienced a federal audit. It is very time-consuming, it's very expensive, it takes man-hours, and I would hope that we never put ourselves in any type of position that might trigger that type of an event. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of manpower, and that comes down to money. I believe we need to comply with the language provided to us by the Missouri School Boards Association. I believe we have a fiduciary responsibility to comply with regulations regardless of any specific political party that may be in power at the time. We comply.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes. I must say, I pride myself, to listen to both sides of the issue. And this is by far the most difficult issue that I've faced my 2.5 years of being, 2 years of being on the board. I've done a lot of research on this and see both sides. I understand, what Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey wrote. Kelly, thank you for taking suggesting we take the time to read that. I also understand through the USDA, we're risking being audited, as Judy said, and we're risking losing funding for food programs for the children of SPS, albeit a low risk for both. There's still a risk. It is wrong to politicize this, but unfortunately it is, and that's so sad. But we cannot ignore the risk of losing funding. And have to remember that we are here to be advocates for our children, all children. Our children are too important to risk losing funding, even if it's a low risk.
Thank you. As the only board member who was not present last board meeting, I'll note that I did watch the board meeting specifically in regard to this policy discussion and the changes to our policy. I will also note that there is a reason that we have, in most months, we have a study session followed by a regular board meeting. And that's so during the study session, board members can ask questions, we can get answers raised. I will say that I was surprised because no board members had brought up this particular concern prior to me going on an extended absence. had I known that, we may have delayed the vote so that all board members can have a discussion. Board Member Byrne, you and I have even discussed on some issues, making sure that all 7 members of the board are present for difficult votes, which may be split. So that's why I put it back on the agenda for this evening, so that all 7 of us do have a vote on that. I'll also note that earlier this evening, all 7 board members did vote to approve the agenda, which included the further vote on these board policies. So all 7 of you already approved that we're going to have a further discussion about this. After the full board speaks, yes, it is in our norms to honor the decision. I have been in particular votes, one particularly contentious vote where I was on the losing side, if you will. And I didn't say a word afterwards. I just supported the decision of the board, and I will do that this evening regardless of how the vote is taken. Now, on to the substance of this. As far as to say no precedent, I'm just going back to just law school and criminology and everything. And does anybody know why the legal drinking age in all 50 states is 21? All 50 states is the legal drinking age is 21. And that is because the federal government threatened to withhold highway funding from all the states. And so eventually all the states fell into compliance. So there is precedence for the federal government using funds as a way to accomplish what their laws or regulations say. I was also perplexed when I was watching the board meeting with board members commenting that the term sex, which is currently in our board policy, includes gender identity and sexual orientation. Well, if the term sex already includes gender identity and sexual orientation, what's the harm in actually adding those 4 or 5 words, if you use the word "and" in there? It's not taking away any additional control because it's already there under your own argument that sex includes sexual orientation and gender identity. So I don't know that it removes any sort of local control or changes any day-to-day operations. What it does do is ensure that our students have over $7 million worth of funds in order to go to class with full bellies so that they can learn. So it just does not seem like you should risk the loss of $7 million. I have not had time to dive into Tennessee versus United States Department of Agriculture. I pulled it up. It looks like it's procedurally more complicated than what I have time to dive into during this meeting. But I will note that in here, one of the statements is that this case is about food stamps and nutrition education, not bathrooms, sports teams, free speech, or religious exercise. And I think that case is true here as well. We're not talking about whether we agree or disagree with protecting sexual orientation and gender identity. What we're saying is that the USDA has required us to place these in our policies in order to continue to receive funding. The only way that our students are going to lose access to this nutrition immediately is for this board to vote down that policy again. And I also just want to talk about remedies. When we're in law school, we always look at what is the remedy. And I think that some board members are misconstruing what your remedy is if you don't agree with this, with what your role is here on the board. If you don't agree with the protection of sexual orientation and gender identity, right or wrong, your remedy is not to vote down a policy that's being required by the federal government. Your remedy is to contact your legislators and run for office if you want to run for office in that role. But right now, in my opinion, there's no reason to vote down this policy change. Is there any further discussion from other board members?
I move for the question.
I'm going to go in the order that we did before. So, Mr. McCoskey, did you want to make any further statement? Okay, Mr. Byrne.
I did reach out to, I didn't know who else to reach out to, and the reason I voted no on this last month was that it was not made, it was clear to me that we were not risking funds. And we may disagree on that, but it's disingenuous to imply that because I voted no on it, that I'm gambling funds. I firmly believe that we are not risking these funds. You may disagree with that. That does not mean that I'm gambling children's lunches on it. I do not believe that it is at risk. I reached out to one of our senator's offices who confirmed with me that there is no risk of losing federal funds for voting down this policy. So I'd like to, again, squash these rumors that we are, I believe the quote was from you, Ms. Kincaid, was to KY3, was that we should not be using the students as political pawns. I don't care for that comment at all. I think it's divisive of this board. I thought we had all agreed that each and every one of us, as we may disagree from time to time, are making decisions with the best interest of the students in mind. And that is no difference here, no difference. We may disagree, but we're disagreeing on how to have the best interest of students in mind. And to imply that we are using the students as political pawns goes against that, the nature of that agreement that I thought we had amongst board members. And I want to clarify that for the media, because in the media coverage that I read, it did again seem to paint the picture that we are gambling with funds. Maybe some believe that. I certainly do not. And the resources that I've reached out to with the federal government, including Senator Schmidt's office, say that that is not the case. Now we find ourselves in the middle of apparently a disagreement between the state and the federal government, according to this letter here. Like Dr. Muhammad Khani said, I don't see a reason for us to rush and pass a change to a policy that was already in place. I think the proper action would be to do no action until the state and the federal government figure this out, because it's not our job to decide between the two. For those reasons, I will vote no on this again. And I would also like to point out again, and it may actually be the other policy, I'm not sure which, these are very close, but when we're talking about politics and playing games here, you don't need to look any further into this document to see what politics and games are being played. That's exactly what this is, that this language is in front of us. And you don't have to look any further than the only other change in one of those documents was as simple as just changing pronouns. It was removing pronouns from his or her and replacing with their. Is that the business we need to be doing? Is that what is that helping the students of this district? Or is that playing games somewhere in Jefferson City or Washington, D.C.? That's political games being played. And that sure is a signal to me about what all of this is about.
Thank you, Board Member Byrne. Board Member Muhammad Khani, you're next if you would like to make an additional statement.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Byrne on every point that you made. You are spot on. I do want to clarify that at no point is this decision or any of my decisions been rooted in politics. I agree. How this got politicized is by our board president bringing this back and choosing to spend more time on this. And I need to emphasize that my vote has nothing to do with my opinions on sexual orientation and gender identity. And for our board president to make that statement is extremely troubling. I yield my time.
Thank you. Board Member Thomas Tate.
I'm just still perplexed as to if it's not politics, then why changing the language is going to impact who negatively? Who does it negatively impact? Does it negatively impact our students to change the language to be whatever it is that is inclusive, or whatever it is that the MSBA or USDA want in order for us to comply with that language? We're not talking about curriculum. We're not talking about safety. We're not talking about bathrooms. We're talking about feeding children. And I don't understand. I really, truly don't understand how complying puts the children at risk in their safety, in their learning. And if we're making decisions that are in the best interest of the children, complying with the USDA, whether or not you agree with what they're asking, is in the best interest of the children.
I'll answer that question.
I'm going to continue on
Okay.
down. Board Member Brunner, do you want to make any additional statement?
My position is known from the last meeting to this one.
Your position is, I'm sorry.
My position on whether or not we should adopt the changes in the policy. I spoke to it last time. I've spoken to it this evening. It stands.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Kreis, did you want to say anything additional?
No, I don't have anything additional.
Okay. I don't have anything additional except to say if sex already includes sexual orientation and gender identity, I don't see any disadvantages in including those words in order to retain our funding and not put a target on our back for any politician.
I'll answer that as well as your question with one possible example. With the idea of sexual orientation and gender identity being a fluid thing to define right now in society, saying in our board policy that we won't discriminate under those grounds is very subjective. And by putting that language in our board policy could open us up potentially to more lawsuits because it's a very subjective thing right now. That's answering your questions. And I would also like now to move as
Oh,
Dr.
wait, I
Muhammad
would like to answer that
commented.
question as well.
And I apologize, I skipped over Board Member McCoskey. Did you want to say anything further?
I do, respectfully, that I hear comments that I don't see why not including this language in this policy would basically harm our children. I think it does. I cannot see for the life of me how adults is going to go down this path to tell children that can't make up their own mind in the first place. They're not qualified on whether they want to change their sex or have their breasts removed or take chemical castration or puberty blockers or anything of that nature. What I am saying, and this is my opinion, that if we go down this road, it's not going to stop there. And I cannot live with myself. I'm going to repeat. I cannot live with myself when another child kills themselves because adults is pushing this ideology and this language. It's not about being political. It's about the safety of the children. And moving forward with this type of language, I'm just afraid that we're going to have another child regret a decision that was enforced or advocated by adults that they will end up on medication for the rest of their life because of adults. This has absolutely no place in this school system. It had absolutely no place to place this language in this policy. I think I should end it there because I will just get even more emotional about trying to save these kids. It's immoral.
Thank you. Board Member Muhammad Khani.
Well, I just wanted to answer that making this change would put us at a legal policy risk. It is unlikely that tomorrow morning the USDA is going to be auditing us, but it is a real risk that the Attorney General will sue us. And then we have to deal with our dollars and our funding to defend yet another lawsuit.
I'd like to make the motion that we table this item.
It's been a motion that we table the vote on policy AC.
I second that motion.
Been a second from Board Member McCoskey. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a verbal vote. The motion is that we table board policy AC adoption and revision, that particular vote.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
No.
Okay. The motion to table board policy AC for adoption and revision passes 4-3. So we will table that until, actually, I didn't even ask that. I'm not going to retake the vote at this time. I failed to ask, at what point did you want to retake that up?
Well, we can discuss it on the next one, which is,
Okay.
same motion will be raised, I'm sure.
Unless I have an objection from anybody on the board, I'm going to assume that I'm going to go back and say that the motion was to lay on the table until our next board meeting.
I think we should wait and see what happens on the Senate floor tomorrow. Let's just wait.
The motion was made and approved. I don't know that
Sorry, postpone.
I don't know that a date had to be applied to it.
Well, I think to have some structure that we would actually look for a date to have a discussion on this once again
I can entertain that motion as a motion to postpone indefinitely.
I guess that's
Oh, you
what
can?
happened.
Oh, thank you very much for that clarity.
Does anybody want to change their vote based on that? Okay, so we're going to assume that the motion that you made was to postpone board policy AC adoption revision indefinitely, which essentially kills it until the board wants to bring it up again, with Board Member Byrne voting aye, Dr. Thomas Tate voting no, Dr. Mohammed Khani voting no, or aye, Mr. Kreis voting aye, Mr. Mikowski voting aye, and Ms. Bruner voting no, and the chair voting no. So that motion to postpone indefinitely does pass. Moving on to item 9.02, which is substantially similar to item 9.01. The recommended action is that the board adopt the policy as presented or amended. Again, this deals with the USDA non-discrimination policy.
So
I make a motion that we postpone this as well as we did with the policy AC.
Okay, there's been a motion from Board Member McCoskey that we postpone Board Policy EF adoption revision indefinitely.
Second.
I have a second from Board Member Byrne. At this time, we'll take a verbal vote on the motion to postpone indefinitely.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Somebody's going to have to go back over. I was making a note here, and I
That's okay.
apologize
And
for
I
missing.
forgot to ask for any discussion, even though it's
Okay.
substantially similar.
Somebody's going to have to give me a rundown. I'm sorry, I was making a note of what I wanted to
That's okay.
remember.
You're good. So there has been, Board Policy EF is on our agenda. Board Member McCoskey has made a motion to postpone Board Policy EF adoption or revision indefinitely, essentially the same vote that we are taking on Board Policy 9.01 to postpone indefinitely. So the question is, essentially, are we going to lay it on the table? Your vote last time was no.
Well, I'm just trying to keep my policy straight here. No.
Okay. And chair votes no. The motion to postpone indefinitely passes 4-3. Moving on to Board Policy GDBA. The recommended action is that the board adopt the policy as presented.
So moved.
Motion from Board Member Kreis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Board Member Thomas Tate. Is there discussion on this matter? Board Member McCoskey.
I have a couple questions as
Okay.
well.
I do, but I've lost my notes.
Oh, you
Board
sent
Member
something
Mohammed Khani,
around.
do you want to start?
You have a
Sure.
copy of that. May I have a copy of that right there, please?
This?
Yeah.
I had a
Thank you, Madam President. In regards to this policy, the support staff compensation, it is recommended here that we put a clause in here, support staff will be paid according to the Fair Labor Standards Act. Payment for extra duties that are seasonal or limited to specific time frame may be paid after the work is performed. And we were removing some language in general. Support staff will be paid in equal installments over a 12-month period in general. What I have comprised here, I've went over this several times, and so I provided the members with this statement that I think that should be written in this format, and that would be disbursement of compensation for support staff must comply with wages and the Fair Labor Standards Act. Support staff are paid in equal installments over a period determined by the Department of Human Resources under the direction of the superintendent and approved by the Board of Education. Payment for extra duties that are seasonal or limited to a specific time frame may be paid after the work was performed at the next regular pay. That is the statement that I would recommend. And one of the reasons for that, just so we're clear, is that we removed language here. It's suggested that we remove the language about equal installments over a 12-month period. Now, I know just recently we've had discussions about annualized pay and are moving in a specific direction about the cost that it takes to make changes such as this. But I don't want to leave future boards with the opportunity that if the climate and the organization changes for the district itself, that the board cannot actually come back and decide that maybe they would institute or implement a 12-month installment, especially for hourly workers, paralegals, and things of that nature. So the purpose of me writing this in this format is that in the future of boards, if they decide that they can change it, that they would make that decision based on the information from the Department of Human Resources and the superintendent. So I'd like to write it like that. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
All righty.
Board Member Muhammad Khani.
Okay, so great. Now I have a question for you, Mr. McCoskey. I'll start with that one. I'm sensing that you're doing this to allow for flexibility of payment for future boards in determining over how many months employees get paid. Is this what this, okay. But then that's in contradiction to the first statement by leaving must comply with wages and the Fair Labor Standards Act. I don't know exactly what that is, but I think that is why we have moved from annualized pay of support staff, of the 9-month staff, to being paid per pay period. That is the Fair Labor Standards. Am I correct?
Well, the Fair Labor Standards Act establishes how you pay somebody. It doesn't necessarily establish when you pay them necessarily.
Oh.
You can make the guidelines for the compensation of your employees as long as you follow the guidelines within FSLA. And it's actually changed to wages and Fair Labor Standards Act. It used to be just Fair Labor Standards Act. That's over time by the federal government that has accomplished that. Often, I also thought about the possibility of reviewing Missouri's labor laws also that could have an impact at some point of time. And I would just ask, we don't have any employees that are working out of the state of Missouri, are they? Well, the reason I ask that is because it could be that if we did, we'd have other states that could have some guidance that we would have to follow. That's all I was going to target or aim at.
So are you saying that it would be in compliance with the Wages and the Fair Labor Standards Act if you had a 9-month employee who would then get paid in installments over 12 months?
Yes.
That would still be in compliance?
Yes.
I see what you're, okay. Can I?
And over time, laws will change all the time.
I'm sorry, what?
Over time, laws will change all
Okay.
the time. This just adds what I believe some additional flexibility.
Okay. I had a couple questions, Dr. Lathan. One had to do with PTO time. At one point when we were discussing how we can help our workforce bridge the 3-month gap where they would not be receiving payment as they don't work over the summer time for us. And I believe I was told that they could cash out of their pay time off. And so if somebody's fortunate enough to not get ill, and they rearrange their schedule so they don't have to take that time off, is that still an option? And how many days are we giving? What is it, almost, is it, how many days and how does that work?
And I'm going to get started, but I want to make sure I'm clear. So the cash out was when we were transitioning from annualized pay to non-annualized pay. So that was a one-time only that staff members could cash in their leave time. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That was the gap between, that was for 12-month employees that we're going to have that gap when it ended on June 30th and wouldn't start getting paid again until August 15th. So they were allowed to take 10 days of PTO to bridge that gap of not being paid.
Did you say 12-month or 9-month employees?
12
Those are 12-month employees.
Okay, run that by me again. But 12-month employees already get paid every month.
So their final paycheck on annualized pay would be at the end of June. They would then work the first 2 months of July. Those would be calculated to be get paid on the end of August. So therefore they wouldn't have, by the end of July, they wouldn't have a paycheck on July 15th. Therefore, we would allow them to cash in 10 days of PTO so that they would get 2 weeks of pay on July 15th.
And these are for employees that do work through the summer?
That is correct. This has not affected 9-month employees yet. They haven't not received paychecks. That won't happen until next summer.
Okay.
Currently, right now, they're receiving larger paychecks every month because they're being paid for the actual time they're working.
And we're revising this policy so that we would be in compliance, so that we could move from 12 months, I don't know, when is that happening? Next year, right? After this summer? Then,
Well, they're currently being paid for the hours they work right now.
right. So we're changing, this policy is coming to us so that we could be in compliance with board policy.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I don't understand why this would even be a board policy, but it is.
The specificity around the language that's currently in the policy should not be that specific, and so that's why we're wanting the language to reference the Fair Standards Act so that regardless of the time frame in which they get paid, we're still within that compliance.
Okay. But I mean, I have to respect the wisdom of past boards who felt that there was a need to have this language in there. And it has to do with taking care of our staff. There is a labor shortage. We are having trouble with recruitment and retention. I had asked Dr. Mulford a couple times in board meetings about the exit interviews, and I've asked several times, both in meetings and in email form, and there's been some back and forth, and I think there was a misunderstanding. I didn't quite understand. I was always under the impression that it was going to be, those results would be shared with the board. And so far, we've received a bar graph. So did the exit interviews include non-contracted employees, or is it just teachers?
Exit interviews are for any staff member leaving if they would like to participate in the interview.
Okay. I think it's important to see those results, and I know it's difficult because it could be scattered, but just seeing it in a bar graph doesn't tell the whole story. Over this last year since we signed on with Oracle, I've heard Dr. Mulford in the past, especially when it came up we had to invest additional funds, give us a whole host of reasons. And I just really feel like I'm hearing all of this, and I hear it's going to cost all this amount of money, which I'm still having a difficult time reconciling that programming can cost into the millions in this day and age, but I don't feel like I have all the information. how much of a hit are we really taking in today's employment market by moving our 9-month employees to being paid per month and not annualized? And I understand all, the reasons behind it, but I just still feel that one component that I'm not quite getting is, what is it really translating into in terms of the loss of staff? And it is really important staff, because our teachers can't function in the classroom without their support staff, because that's the discipline nightmare that we're dealing with right now. And so I just feel like that piece is still missing, and I'm just really grappling with it. And so I do like Mr. McCoskey's suggestion here, because it does allow us flexibility. However, I personally would like to have more information, so that I would like to see this tabled so that I could get this last bit of information and digest it, so that I can make an informed vote. I don't feel like I can have a vote that in good conscience is completely informed.
And I'll just remind all the board members that, of course, we've gone to non-annualized pay already. This amendment the change to the board policy is simply to reflect what is currently in practice within the district. Are there any other, and before Board Member McCoskey, before we come back to you, are there any other comments from other board members?
I just may be a little dense on this, but it says support staff will be paid according to the Fair Labor Standards Act. Okay? Disbursement of compensation for support staff must comply with the wages in the Fair Labor Standards Act. That says virtually the same thing, correct? So if I heard you correctly, and you'll correct me, I'm sure, if I'm wrong.
No.
Well, now, it may happen. Unlikely, of course, but it might happen. No, what I'm saying is, you were not wanting to restrict what future boards might believe is the appropriate thing to do. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What I would say to that is, we already don't restrict what future boards do, because they can come in and change it if they decide that's what needs to happen. I think this is straightforward. We'll be paid according to the Fair Labor Standards Act. Again, it's a compliance issue, and it's there. I am new to the board, absolutely, but I've also listened to a lot of discussion about this, and I don't like employees to be unhappy. I don't. I know we're more productive when people feel like they're heard and they're listened to. I get all that, and I recognize it, and I appreciate it. But there was plenty of time in past months before we got this deep into the weeds in terms of changing our whole payroll system to go over this if people didn't agree with it. So those decisions have been made. That was a recommendation that was made. We sat here and approved it through the budget, if nothing else. It seems to me. I'm not saying this is old news, because it's still important, and it's still a hot button for a lot of people. But that ship sailed. It sailed. We gave permission as a board for the superintendent to move ahead with it.
When?
Well, when we didn't tell her not to, I suppose.
Is there any further discussion from board members?
Yes. So to clarify on what you were saying, Mrs. Bruner, we had a lot of discussions on this, and it was not put in front of the board. This was a administrative decision that staff made, and we heard a lot of comments. which put us in a tough position. I don't feel like through that whole process I ever heard, it never quite made sense to me. I never really heard the reasoning, why were we taking on this huge fight? A lot of employees are upset. They came back to us month after month. I was caught in the middle. It honestly just, it seems to me to make sense to be a good business practice to not do annualized pay. But at the same time, if we're short employees and that's what those employees want, it might be a good thing to offer. So I was caught in the middle of this and also never asked to make a decision on it. But now, I agree. I don't like that we've gone this far and now we have to make a decision on it. I wish we would have known about this or made a decision on this sooner. I don't like being put at the last minute in a box and saying, you have to make that decision now, we've gone too far, yet we were never asked prior. So this is a tough decision, a tough place to be in. For me, I would just really like, if I'm going to put my vote of support behind this, which I would like to do because it seems to me like providing flexibility to staff is the thing that we should do. It doesn't make sense that this was ever a board policy. So it does make sense that it was never brought to our attention. We didn't expect this to be a board policy, but it somehow was. But now that I do have to put my vote on it, I would like to know here publicly, like why could people not be grandfathered in? Why were there not? Why could we not make exceptions? How much is this going to cost us if this doesn't pass tonight? I think we're owed those answers if we, the elected members of the public, are going to have to put our vote behind it.
And I'll just remind board members that, again, this is to change the board policy. This is not adopting or not adopting annualized pay, but board member
But you just said a minute ago, we are out of board policy now. We are currently operating outside of board policy.
Our board policy does not reflect the way that the district is currently operating.
So what I said was correct. We are currently not operating under board policy.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, this affects annualized pay. And here we are, and we have to make the decision now, and we're being put in a tough position. And I don't think that's intentional on the staff's part. I think it was an oversight, which I totally understand. Yet here we are, and we're being asked to fix that. And I think if we're going to be asked to fix that, we need to know, why is this such a big deal? Why do we need to correct this?
I just wanted to state that I don't believe that this policy supersedes the switch that we've made with regards to annualized pay. It does not supersede that.
You're saying we could continue to act outside of board policy?
No, we have to change our policy like we often do to reflect our current practices.
We don't have to. It could fail tonight.
So just to go back to answer your question, if you, and actually you were not on the board, you came on the board, I think right around it was time, when we were audited in 2021, and we received the audit findings of a number of issues around our ERP system. So we had the ERP taking hold. Then we received recommendations from our auditors and also recommendations from the Fair Labor Standards Board as it relates to annualized pay. And so when we started moving forward with the ERP system, we made the adoption of selecting the company in the Oracle, which is the program that we're using, our platform. When we made that conversion, with those recommendations, we needed to move away from annualized pay, as all the programs and coding was written for the particular system. It was written to address going to a standard. Going back to your why can't we grandfather it? As we move away with one system, when you write the codes and the process, that is, I'm sorry, Bruce, if I'm overstepping my bounds and saying it backwards, but you're going down that process. So, and then back to you saying, well, if this doesn't pass, we would not be able to change the middle of this year. Nothing changes about payroll. You don't just turn around, and we've been building a system for 2 years now that would say, oh, this fails, we're going to stop and we're going to go back to annualized pay. It doesn't work like, I wish things were that easy in pay system for over 3,300 employees. It doesn't work like that. And so we still would have to find a way. As you're right, as you say, this should have never been in board policy. Nothing against the previous board back in 2017 when this was, I guess, the last time it was edited. But that's why it was an oversight of, we make those decisions, we're making it being in compliance with the audit, being in compliance with those recommendations that we're moving forward. And so that's the work. If you recall also, we are ready to go live in January with the full system of Oracle, like I said, that we've been working on now for over 2.5 years to get to this point.
Any further discussion at this time? Ben?
If I may, please.
Sure.
I agree with everything that you said, Dr. Lathan, and it is true. I mean, you just can't in midstream change everything. It's very difficult. I mean, I would not like my employer to do that as well. But there is a factor of trying to find a way that we can make all of our employees happy, of course, and you know that better than most. And because this is a chain reaction, what happens when you begin to move somebody's annualized pay or what, because it will translate, like say for paralegals or paras within the school system, and trying to help assist our educators, and then we end up with discipline problems, and then before you know it, it's costing us even more money, and I see that where that can happen. It's just a chain reaction. In this case, with regards to the Fair Labor Standards Act, I do concur that the Fair Labor Standards Act does recommend that you take this approach, and if I remember correctly, you had presented that, and we actually, as a board, we voted on this to extend $550,000, I think it was, until, so we can at least get Oracle on board till the end of December. Is that about right? Yeah.
You're correct, yes.
Okay. The reason I wrote in this text in this way is that sometime down the road, if that has an opportunity to change, then we do it. Doesn't say anything about 12 months, doesn't say anything about 9 months. Fair Labor Standard Act doesn't even say that you should pay somebody 9 months, 12 months, 8 months, 6 months, or whatever. What Fair Labor Standards Act would guide you to say is that this is the best practices, this is your recommendation, and you took those best practices and recommendations and you ran with it, and that's where we are today. I think that it does call for cleaning this language up, but with respect to other board members and some of the comments I hear right now, that if there is some way that we can have additional information to be able to satisfy some of the members in their questions with regards to this, that it might be one of those things that we take a little more time to do that. But here we are. We got 12 months in the language, and to comply, we should be removing that language, because it is, as Board Member Tate had indicated, this is what we're doing right now. And we need to make it right with policy. So I'll leave it at that, because it's kind of up in the air at this point on moving forward. I just knew that I would hope that maybe the language I provided left us an opening that down the road, if the board, on the recommendation of the superintendent and human resource professional that's running human resources, decide that this can change and the board can improve it.
So
Just to add one response to Ms. McCoskey. So this language was on the advisement of our attorney, because going back to, attorney said it should come out completely. The whole entire section, compensation disbursement, really should be removed from the policy, was what was truly the initial recommendation.
Okay.
And it was just like, okay, let's just put something in so people know we're trying to be in compliance. So this language, the way it's written in green, that one sentence, 2 sentences, is based on the advisement of our legal counsel.
So, Mr. McCoskey, your intent with this language is to provide flexibility for staff to pay as they need to? Because I think I hear you saying that.
If the district determines that they would want to reconsider down the road a different pay period, whether it be 9 months or whether it be 12 months or whatever, they have the flexibility to do that.
Isn't that what the language we have proposed does? It just provides flexibility?
I don't see it that way.
That is what our attorney shared. This provides flexibility of whatever decision is made in future years by the district. This is the language that was advised to do that.
But I think what Mr. McCoskey's language, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it brings it to the board. That's the key difference that I'm picking up here. So you were saying that we're being asked to vote on it now and we were never asked before, so it's kind of late in the game. But should the district want to change, the next time they want to change the way they do things, it does have to be approved by the board.
Oh,
Do you
so
see that part?
The language where it says "and approved by the Board of Education."
Right, so I suspect that was intentional.
Correct.
Okay.
Where I'm confused is, it says support staff are paid in equal installments over a period determined by the Department of Human Resources. That sounds like a whole new thing. I mean, that's language that we're not prepared to dictate on staff to do, because that's saying, you know, if an employee works 22 hours one month and 40 hours the next month, then they're getting equal installments, but it might be over a 10-month period, which is neither of the two options that we've had up to this point, correct?
Correct.
I don't think that was your intent in this.
Did you have legal review this?
No, I did not.
You just drafted this?
Yes.
So your intent was to say, we want to provide staff flexibility, but should there be changes, it's got to come back to it's got to be approved by the board.
That's correct.
The payment method that they choose needs to be board approved. Okay.
Yes, Board Member Kreis.
Are you done? I mean, Kelly, I don't want.
Yes, I'm done, thank you.
Okay. This is getting complicated. You know, the board discussed this, 21, we got recommendations from the auditors. You know, we decided to go away from analyzed pay. The change should have been made then, and we missed it. It was just missed. And we're playing catch up now. Just keep the language, just my opinion, keep the language as simple as possible. These policies are not set in stone. Future boards can make changes as they see fit.
Is there any other discussion, or are we ready to vote?
Ready to vote.
Okay, there's been a motion that the board adopt the policy as presented, and that's Board Policy GDBA. And a second, and it's time we will vote.
Hold on.
Yep, I've been logged out as well.
So we're voting to accept it.
We are voting that the board adopt the policy as presented.
It's not on my screen now.
I'm missing 2 votes, so we'll need to.
Okay, we're going to do a verbal vote, and again, the motion is that the board adopt the policy as presented, and that is policy GDBA.
How do I end up with this
Do
seat?
you want me to
And I get
start
the-
over here? I know.
get the
I know.
strategic
We'll start-
disadvantage every
We'll start
time.
with Board Member Bruno. So. Also an aye from Board Member McCoskey.
Aye.
Abstain.
You're abstaining?
Yes, I
Okay.
am.
Aye.
No.
Okay. And chair votes aye. Motion passes 5-1 to 1 abstention. Moving on to new business, item 10.01, strategic plan governing priority number 2. And Dr. Shaw, you are joining us again.
Good evening again. So current board policy, GCPB, provides an early notice separation incentive for contracted employees in the amount of $1,000 if they submit their resignation or retirement letter on or before January 5th, $750 on or before February 5th, and $500 on or before March 5th. Non-contracted employees also receive these same early resignation or retirement incentives. Theirs are based on a number of days that they provide that notice because they're not contracted. 90 plus days for $1,000, 60 to 89 for $750, and 30 to 59 for $500. So we're bringing this to your attention tonight due to the number of positions that will no longer exist beginning July 1st, 2024, because they are currently being funded by ESSER allocated dollars. It's important for administration to know as early as possible what other positions are going to need to be filled for the 24-25 school year. So the recommendation tonight from administration is that a one-time early separation notice incentive payment in the amount of $1,500 under the terms in board policy GCPB, and who submit an early notice of resignation or retirement to the Human Resources Department on or before November 30th of 2023. To receive this one-time payment, employees must work the entirety of their contract of the fiscal year in which notice was given. That's for the contracted employees, or the entirety of their 2023-24 work calendar for non-contracted employees, whichever is applicable. The respective incentive amount will be paid on their final paycheck to employees. And due to the average number of employees that have taken advantage since its inception of the early retirement or resignation incentive of the $1,000, we do anticipate if that same number, that same average takes place this year, and they would all decide to submit that resignation or retirement prior to November 30th, we would anticipate approximately $40,000 additional funds that it would cost the district to do this. But the information that we would gain as early as possible would be so beneficial because the goal obviously is for those individuals that are now in ESSER-funded positions that we are able to fill them into positions through attrition, because on average we have about 200 employees annually that either resign or retire, and these numbers would fit within that, assuming that the certifications match up.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we've got a motion from Board Member Thomas Tate that the board approve the early separation notice incentive adjustment as presented. Do I have a second?
I have a second on that.
Okay, I have a second from Board Member McCoskey. Any further discussion?
Right here.
Oh, yes.
I saw that we had, Dr. Lathan, that email we had earlier that had highlighted, it was really, I felt like the latter part of this. And I'd asked about how we currently do things. And thank you for this, because that's what got added, right? Because, so my question's been answered.
Yes.
Right? But the part that got highlighted was the latter half.
Right.
I know that the number went from 25 to 40, but I was confused about, did I read this wrong? Okay, so what you added was, okay, I can't see your face.
Oh, sorry.
I've been struggling with that all night. So you added the front part, right?
Right, we wanted to make sure it was clear that this was, oh, sorry. Yes, we wanted to. We wanted to make sure it was clear that this is for certified and non-certified staff. So,
Okay.
because initially, the posting from Friday did not reflect that. And we wanted to make sure it's clear that it's in compliance with board policy GCPB. Yeah.
Right, and then it has current, and then what we're doing extra.
Yes.
And so I think that this suffices. You don't have to respond to that. This explains everything.
And for clarity, this is not $1,500 on top of the $1,000 that they would get.
No, it's 1,500 instead of the 1,000.
Instead of 1,000,
That's my
correct.
understanding. Although, okay, I got to add this. I don't know if you guys noticed, but look at the top. It shows, you know, meeting, category, subject, access type, recommended action. This is the first time I'm seeing goals. Do we always have that? We are committed to being responsible leaders.
Ms. Harrington went to training this summer.
who went
on
to
how
training?
Mrs.
Oh.
Harrington went to training on how to take our strategic plan and link it to our
Oh.
board agendas.
Okay.
Thank you for noticing that.
I noticed
Yay.
everything. That was good. Okay, thanks. I'm good.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I'm good.
I have a question. Does it matter how many years an employee has worked within the district to be eligible for this?
Yes, so in the board policy, they have to be a full-time employee for a year.
Just
in
for
order- for 1
somebody
year.
could come in and work for 1 year and decide, nah, it's not for me, and get this same incentive
correct.
as somebody that we might be encouraged, not that we encourage people to retire, but so that we know where our openings are.
Right.
Okay. I just wouldn't want people to think we're pushing anyone out.
Right.
This would be seen as a bonus, I would hope.
We're wanting we want to know as early as possible, given the number of positions
Sure.
that we know we won't continue to be able to fund.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, seeing none, we'll vote. motion that the board approve the early separation notice incentive adjustment as presented passes 7-0. Moving on to item 11.01, sanitary sewer easement. Dr. Shaw will remain with us.
So due to two of the properties that we have purchased north of Reed Middle School on Campbell Avenue, behind those houses directly is an alleyway. Currently, there's a sanitary sewer that runs through that alleyway, and so up to this point, that sewer has been protected by the alleyway. And then it runs onto our property, and there's a current easement of that sanitary sewer on our property. We intend to request vacation of the alley now that we own both sides of the alley, so that we can use that for the development of the property. And in order to do that, the city of Springfield has asked that we have a sanitary easement placed now on that section of the sewer line because it's no longer protected by the alley. And therefore, that would be our recommendation tonight, that the board approve that. There is no cost to the district. It doesn't affect anything negatively to the district, but it just simply allows them the opportunity in the event that they need to work on the sewer line at that point. They now have the opportunity to do that because it's no longer protected by the alleyway.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Board Member Thomas Tate that the board authorize and approve granting a sewer easement to the city of Springfield.
I'll second that.
And a second from Mr. Makowski in the area adjacent to Reed Middle School where the alleyway was vacated. Is there any further discussion?
I have a question.
Okay, you go first.
And I'm really sorry that I didn't get this to you sooner.
It's okay.
Real time, happening in real time. Yeah. This says, for the purpose of constructing and maintaining a sanitary sewer system. Are we saying that we will maintain the sewer system, or is?
That's the city. So we're granting them the easement so that they can construct
They can
and maintain.
construct,
That's
they
correct.
will construct and maintain. Okay.
But it would mean them now coming onto our property to do that.
So we cannot build there, it has to be available for them, or we can, but they'd have to be able to.
Right. I think what will be there in the design is actually a driveway for car pickup and drop off. So in the event that they had to go in and do something, they would have to tear up the asphalt, take care of it, and then they would come back and replace everything as it was.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Mohammed Khani.
That was my question. Where was the building going to be in relation to that? And so this gives them the right to come back at a future time, but with notice so that we can properly secure our property for the security of our
And
kids.
they currently have an easement on the sewer line already on our property.
Okay.
The reason this is having to be added is because it's part of the alleyway and it's protected by the alleyway. Once the alley is vacated, because we now own both properties on both sides of the alley, there needs to be an easement in place.
Okay, and so this driveway is not like the key driveway?
No, this is an alley that is behind the properties.
No, but in the future plans?
No,
This isn't like in the car line?
the sewer line will go under the car line, yes.
Oh, so this, okay.
Yes.
This is an important.
It's on the northeast
Okay.
part of the property.
Got it.
Anything further? Okay, seeing nothing, we'll vote. Okay, the motion that the board authorize and approve granting a sewer easement to the city of Springfield passes 7-0. Moving on to item 11.02, change orders and agreements.
So
Still
we
with
do
us.
have a few change orders and agreements. What you will notice predominantly on Man and Wilder, those are substantial deducts. One of the things that I talked with the board about as you approve these construction projects is there was some redesign taking place on the cosmetic and the appearance and design, if you will, of the precast panels, and we knew there would be significant cost savings there. So for Man, that does represent $141,000 in cost savings, and Wilder is $226,700 in cost savings. You'll also see that there is an adjustment to the Reed design contract with SAP. That's for two reasons. One, the audio, acoustic, and design contract will be underneath SAM. We had this same kind of contract at Jarrett. It is much more substantial in this project because we do have a designated auditorium that will require more design. So that is under their contract. And then all of the additional fine arts and performing spaces that we did add to the project after we came in an agreement with their contract is also part of this. At less than 5% is their fee on that additional scope of work. So less than what their overall amount is per the scope of work. So those are the three main items that make up this list with a total of a deduct total $137,976.
Any questions?
One question. What are Knox boxes?
Oh, I looked
So
that up.
Knox boxes are boxes that are placed on every building. We have several buildings that we don't have that.
Right.
And so it's a Knox box. It's a key that the fire department only has. And then we will have items, we'll have keys to the building in those. We will have swipe cards, security badges, so that in the event of an emergency, they're able to get into the building quickly. And we don't, so as part of our safety security measures, we needed to make sure those were on all of our buildings.
I learned that on Chicago Fire.
And if I may,
I learned that on Chicago Fire.
if I may, they don't have to break the glass to get in.
Right. That's the
And
main
then
point behind
with the protection that we have, it's going to take an effort for them to break
Yeah,
that glass.
absolutely, you're right, Steve.
We have them on gates at campuses so that we can close off campuses so that it keeps the students safe. But in the event they would have to get in there, they would have a Knox box to be able to open that gate, so.
So this means all the buildings now have a Knox box?
Yes.
Okay.
We had 27 sites that did not have them.
Any further discussion? At this time, the recommended action is that the board approve the change orders and agreements as presented. Do I have a motion?
Make that motion.
Motion
I'll
from-
second it.
Okay, motion from member Thomas Tate and second from member Mohammed Khani. This time we'll vote. And the motion that the board approve the change orders and agreements as presented passes 7-0. Moving on to item 12.01, superintendent's update.
Yes, good evening, board members. I actually have a presentation for you tonight, and I want to make sure I can see everyone. So I'm going to actually go to the podium. Steve, put your phone up. This is my classroom now. You had your part of the board meeting. This is my part now. Thank you, Sunshine. Yeah, they don't want me messing with the technology. You notice she ran over here. So thank you, board members, for the opportunity to provide a first quarter update as it relates to governing priority 1, success-ready students. If you recall, we started our discussion actually last fall around discipline when we were assembling our strategic plan. We met in May with a board member retreat to onboard not only our new board member, but also to kind of just start working on our strategic plan. And then we provided a presentation to you in August to talk about our work from May to August. And so I want to just bring some updates to you. Number one, I'd like for us to look at the 5-year discipline trend. And we're going back to before COVID to 2019. And as you can see, this is around students that were suspended for 10 or more days. So OSS means out of school suspension. And this is the information that we actually provide to DESE and as they continue to keep information on our district. And as you will see, the number of students that have been suspended in the previous year was 784 students had 10 or more out of school suspensions. And so you kind of see the trend over the last 5 years or so. There was a focus prior to 2021 around loss of instructional time as it relates to out of school suspensions. And you'll notice that there was a dip there. Our focus has been over the past several years is to make sure we're being fair, to make sure we're being consistent, but we're holding students accountable for their behavior. At the end of the first quarter, and our first quarter just ended, we've had 113 students that have had 10 or more days of out-of-school suspension. Let's look at also our 3-year incident trend for the first quarter. So we're comparing the first quarter over the past 3 years. These, if you look across the bottom there, these are the top disciplinary infractions that students that we're seeing our high numbers around. Disorderly conduct, a number of items from a building level perspective. Have a former principal here that can share that sitting around the dais, also all these former principals here in the audience. It's around disorderly conduct, tardies, and you'll notice something about tardies. You'll notice that that number is extremely high. What we found about 2 years ago or last year is we had an issue where some schools were recording tardies, some were not. Am I correct? Or they made a decision on what was considered tardy and not tardy. And so our push this past year has been, we want tardies recorded, making sure that that information is recorded. Once again, we need to be consistent across the district. Remember, our focus is also on attendance. And we need to know who's on time, and as we count their attendance. Assault behavior of fighting in class, you see those numbers there. And this is, like I said, comparison to the previous first quarters in the previous 2 years. And then defiance, insubordination, and then also assault to school personnel or non-students. And so you see those numbers in front of you. And board members, I'll be glad to also share this information with you. Some of this information I know you received in the board weekly update, but I wanted to take some time to expand on that. Then you also see our 3-year action trend for first quarter as it relates to conferencing, when a principal conference with the student, in-school suspensions, OSS, Form A, detentions, another thing, and then detentions, not only detentions after school, but detentions also during the school day, as it relates to, think about it from a standpoint of missing lunch. And as you see those numbers over the past several years, once again, we've tightened up on monitoring and ensuring that information is being entered into eSchool so that we can make decisions around the resources that our campuses need in order to ensure that we're maintaining that positive classroom environment. Let's talk about our prior committee work. Some of us have had conversations around the dais and also in our one-on-one meetings around discipline, because that conversation didn't just come up last year when we were putting together or assembling our strategic plan. So if you go back to the work that actually started back in 1819, so prior, let's see, none of us were here, I don't think, for us, the dais, and I know we had staff in the room. So work was started around reviewing the discipline codes of conduct. We also always, when we're looking at making changes, whether it's changes to discipline or other decisions that we make around even different incentives, we also look and see what are our peer districts doing. When we talk about peer districts, we're talking about districts that are like in size to Springfield Public Schools. Not a lot, though, of course, because we are the largest in the state. But we look at their free and reduced lunch status. We look at their student enrollment. Then we also say, what's going on with our regional peers, the peers that are around us? Although we are totally different when you think about the number of students that we have in this district that qualifies for free and reduced lunch, and then our student population. But we always still want to know what's happening in our region. So that work started in 1819. Then also, if you'll go back and recall, when I arrived, part of my entry plan, we assembled a group again to take a look at that. And then in August of 22, if I'm not mistaken, 22, or yeah, August of 21, I believe we had a discussion even at the board level around discipline. And so this was the work. And then last fall, once again, we know that from those surveys through thought exchange, we heard a lot around how are we going to address discipline? What do we need to do as a district? And let's just talk about our work together as a group. If you recall, when we created the strategic plan around Governing Priority 1, Success Ready Student, we wanted to focus on maintaining a positive classroom environment conducive to teaching and learning. In May, when we met, at your direction, you asked me to bring to you what we're going to do as a team to address the concerns that we heard last fall when we were creating our strategic plan. If you recall, we had a list of items for you, and I just want to take you back to those items that were shared with you and just focusing on the highlighted items in May, that during the summer of 2023, divisional leadership, that includes our executive directors, our directors, will create a guide outlining a consistent consequence of progressive discipline. I want us to also just think, just as an employee, there's a process that we use on any job around progressive discipline. If an employee has an infraction or situation, there is a process that is utilized. That process should be fair, it should be consistent, so that you don't lend yourself to other issues. And so that's what we set out to do this past May. And like I said, this information was shared at our May 2nd board retreat. If you recall, we also talked about every student in the district receiving a hard copy of the Student Code of Conduct and the handbook. To date, we've received 18,904 of those forms signed by the parent, guardian, or caretaker for our students out of our 24,000 students. We're still working on trying to get to the finish line, but that tells you, number one, that our schools are trying to get that information back, that our parents are engaged. Now, engagement varies from home to home. We all know that, we get that. But just to know that a conversation started in over 18,000 homes. Now, I know some of the homes have multiple children, but the conversations have started in our district around what our expectations are. We also shared with you in May, step number 10, that our executive directors of learning would be reviewing building discipline reports with principals quarterly. So remember, we are at the end of the first quarter, and so now we're going to start auditing and looking at those consequences, looking at how they utilize progressive discipline. Part of our job is to coach and support, but in coaching and supporting, principals still have the autonomy to run their buildings. We can't go out and run all of their buildings. We have over 55 sites. We don't do that. What principals do is they utilize their executive directors of learning to consult with them. But principals make the decisions in their buildings about what the consequence will be. And they do that based on conducting an investigation. Now, they don't conduct it similar to what police officers do, but there is a process of gathering the facts and then making a decision. But they have to also make a decision on not only what's in the best interest of the staff member or the other students in the class, but also in the best interest of the child that we have been all selected to serve, or children. Once again, these are the 15 steps that we discussed last May. We are working through those steps. And let's just talk about our current work. If you recall, part of our current work, and we actually presented this in August when we presented our update, is that throughout the summer, we provided leader discipline calibration training for our principals and assistant principals, and also ensuring that they were placing things in eSchool, and ensuring, like I said, that we have that information. Because when I need a report, whether I'm responding to board members or trying to make decisions on what we need to do for as it relates to resources, we need to be able to pull that information from eSchool. And to do that, we wanted to make sure everyone knew. And there were some outcomes and focus areas that we focused on. As you can see, part of that agenda, which is on the right-hand side, we focused on the code of conduct. We focused on progressive discipline. But I want you to go over to the left where we talked about the outcomes during these meetings and trainings with our principals, is ensuring, once again, that they knew how to process office and manage student behaviors as we looked at progressive discipline, making sure that they understood the student handbook discipline guidelines, and ensuring that we would initiate a development of a focus room with the entry-exit protocol by site. Notice the key, entry-exit. What happens when we receive concerns, if we don't know the school and sometimes down to the classroom where there's a problem, we can't fix it and we can't solve it. But just saying, oh, this is the problem, I need to know that at Christ Elementary School, XYZ occurred, and this is the concern that was raised. Because then a part of our job is to research and go out and find out. And because there might be some additional assistance and coaching that might be needed, either for the teacher, the principal, or the other staff members in the building. And that's part of the role of what we should be doing. We believe in making sure that we are holding students accountable. But like I said, at the end of the day, we have to also have a plan that as we discipline students, how are we ensuring that academically they're still receiving the level of instruction that they need? Here's the process that our leaders should be using as it relates to discipline. Referring to the student handbook for discipline scope and sequence related to that particular offense. Utilize the Progressive Discipline Guide to help ensure consistent application of discipline. Notice what we said. Utilize, it's a guide. It's a guide. Just like we provide curriculum guides, we provide resources, you use it as a guide as you move forward. Take into consideration the specific circumstances to determine a final decision related to the individual student. If needed, they can connect with their director or executive director for further counsel prior to making final discipline decisions. And we do that so that when there is a concern, whether there's a concern from a staff member or from a parent, we can say, here's the protocol that we followed. If we need to make necessary adjustments, we then go and do that. But we need to be able to know the specific incident and the particular situation. Once again, at the end of the day, it is the principal's final decision unless there's something, there has been a misstep. And then the directors and executive directors will go and work with them and say, this is, you know what, this was the decision that was made. You should have looked at it this way. This is how we need to adjust and to deal with that particular situation. Focus room clarification, that was another question that I was asked about, is as we look at our focus rooms. The focus room is used for intervention, self-regulation, reset, identification of missing skills, reteach, and strategic breaks that are preventative. It is not for playtime, to escape from instruction, to be there for a full day, to be utilized as a study hall, work completion, or makeup area. As we go out and audit and look at consequences and we're looking at those logs, we're looking to see if there's fidelity around the focus rooms. If not, then part of that coaching conversation with the administrator or the behavior technician or interventionist is ensuring that we have that structure set up and that it is in place so that we can ensure that students have an opportunity, like I said, to get themselves together, but to get back to class as soon as possible. If you recall, last May, we talked about the difference between an in-school suspension room, when I break a school rule, and a focus room. Now, what does that play out, or what does that look like in our own lines of work? It looks like taking a walk. It looks like going to the coffee shop, getting a coffee, and Coca-Cola at times for me. It looks like different things. It might look like stretching. Or sitting outside in the sun. We have staff members that will sit out on the balcony out here and just take in the sun. And so it looks like it. So think about it from that standpoint. But children need an opportunity to redeem themselves. Let's just put it in perspective. I might make a misstep as a child, but I should be afforded the opportunity to get myself together, to have a conversation with a caring adult, to get myself focused, and then to be able to get back to my classroom. But there's a process in between from that conversation in the focus room, or even in school suspension, as we started training around restorative justice last year, is ensuring that the adult and the child have an opportunity to conversate around what are the appropriate expectations of how do you behave in a classroom, how do you behave in the cafeteria, on the school bus. Remember, that ties back to PBIS, which is what we implemented district-wide this school year. Future work, once again, we're starting those quarterly reviews to look at the audit of consequences used, the audit of sequence of progressive discipline, our culture team reviews of progressive discipline guides, and then school safety audits as needed. As we look at data around different infractions at various campuses, if we need to take a team out and take a look to observe and look at not only looking at paperwork, but observing those different interactions, whether it's during class changes or actually being in classrooms, we've done that. We've done that this year. A couple of our campuses are more challenging than others. We own that and we admit that. And that's why we've had to deploy additional resources to those particular campuses. But we also need to understand that we are here to educate over 24,000 students. It looks different from campus to campus, but what should not be different is the consequences that we are administering and giving out for holding students accountable for their behavior. And so we're going to continue our focus as we continue to move into second quarter, as we continue to provide the board with updates around our strategic plan, be coming back to you with additional information. So board members, that concludes my update. I'd be glad to take your questions at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Lathan. Are there any questions from board members?
I have one. So, oh, I'm sorry, did I cut somebody off?
You start, and then we'll go to Scott.
When you're looking at revising the handbook, how many people are involved when you do that?
Let me ask our Chief of Human Resources, who was the last person to oversee that committee. Mr. Chief?
You're good, I'm fine. Put me on the spot, that's okay. There was probably, it's like 35-ish. We were looking at it earlier. I think there was like 35 folks. The committee last time, or that work team, whatever we were calling it, was much bigger than the one that I chaired in 2018-19. That group was smaller. The last one we did was much bigger. So I would say 35 roughly, so.
We just wanted everyone to see your haircut. That's why I asked that question.
Well, all right. So what groups are represented with that work group?
So we have, we have administrators on there. So we have site administrators. We have district level administrators too. The director of student services is always on there because he is the person, Courtney Martin, Dr. Martin, is the person who meets with students that get suspended longer than 10 days to determine what we're going to do with them after that suspension is over. NEA had members on both groups, so we had teacher representation on both work teams too.
The 20, what is this, 18, 19?
The last one too, the expansion, because we had more people on there, we had community members on that one. And we had parents on that one too. The one in 18, 19, I don't believe we had parents on, so.
We also had representation from special education, obviously with the implications around that work.
I like the fact that you included the community in on that. I think that's a good thing.
And that was Dr. Lathan's idea. I mean, we didn't do that in 18, 19, and when she came and put this in her entry plan, she was the one that recommended that we do that.
But thank you for bringing up, I do need to point out about special education, because there is a misunderstanding of special education and consequences. We are required by federal law to follow a process when it comes to discipline students that have a IEP. So when they have that individualized education plan. So we must follow it. If there are issues or concerns, if we were to get to that 10th day, we must hold a meeting to talk about what happens next as it relates to that particular child. But if it's a manifestation of their, it's a determination of their manifestation that that's a part of their behavior, that their behavior is causing them based on what is in their IEP to act in a certain way, then we have to look at options for that particular child. It might be a more restrictive environment. I also want to point out, this is why we also this year for gen ed students, this is our second year of our RISE program to address elementary students that have exhibited so many extreme behavior issues, to expand that program. Remember, we moved it from Sherwood Elementary, where it was one class last year. It is now at the Studi building, and we are increasing that class. And we have to actually look at a possible relocation to Old Sherwood so that we have more space and we have some additional resources that we can provide those students. So thank you for bringing that up. Ms. Bruner, was that it?
No.
Okay.
Sometimes when we were looking at the line graph, it looked like there was such a spike. I would just, as much as we would like to forget about COVID, I would remind people that when those numbers were really low, students were in school 2 days a week.
Yep.
And they were home, everyone was home on Wednesday, and then another group of alphabet kids came in Thursday, Friday. So, and I was the interim principal, lead principal at Central at the time. So I can tell you from firsthand experience, our numbers were very low then. They did not represent what happened fourth quarter when everybody came back, because that created other issues. But I think it would be easy, if you forget about COVID and what we were all living with, it would be easy to look at that number from early on and think, well, good Lord, what's happened here? Well, COVID and what we were doing in terms of their education made a huge difference in the way those numbers look. So I just want to remind people of that, again, as much as we would like to forget it. I will say too that as someone that has sat in the principal's chair and And,
There you go.
okay, okay. It's important that students be given what we call due process. That's part of the law. And students have to be told what they're being accused of. They have to be afforded their opportunity to give their side of the story, and then the principal has to do the very best he or she can do to come up with something reasonable. I have always believed that the appropriate discipline response or consequence is the least that you have to do to change the behavior. The least that you do to change the behavior. Now, as I said back months ago, some of these behaviors are ingrained in kids. They are now habits. It is very difficult to change habits. And so, you know, things don't switch around overnight. It's challenging at the building level to calibrate discipline. Elementary has it a little easier because they have one administrator, basically, that makes those decisions. No pancake is so flat that there aren't two sides to it. And so when you sit and, you know, classroom teachers are balancing and making these decisions all day, every day, and their job is unbelievably challenging. It is. No one can sit up here and say that it isn't. The best teachers make it look easy. It is anything but that. So the fact that we're having some growing pains with this, I guess I'm not totally surprised by that. But I also want us to keep our focus, our eye on the ball, and that's to keep kids in school, to make sure that the classrooms are safe, to make sure that it's orderly, and then to support staff, administrators, KAC folks, however we can at this level to make the job as not easy, it's never going to be possible, but to make it as productive as possible, with always keeping student learning at the focus and keeping kids in school. And, you know, when Dr. Holt brought up the special education issue, I'm not sure people at the board table really understand how tricky that gets and what kinds of constraints there are in terms of discipline related to special needs students. And that's what I taught. So it's not that I'm not sympathetic to all of that, but it is hard and it's a balancing act, and it's never going to be easy, and it's harder now than I've ever seen it. It just is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Kreis, did you want to?
Yes, thank you. You said the principals have the autonomy in the buildings, but the consequences should not be different. How do you know they're consistent but
That's why
across
we were
sites?
conducting the audits. Like I said,
Got
we're
it.
getting ready now to look at the consequences that were administered throughout the first quarter. We're looking at the decisions that were made. And so part of that, the audits is the executive directors meeting with them to review their data. So it's actually pulling those records from eSchool and taking a look by campus. We can see, based on, like you said, we can see disorderly conduct, we can see the various infractions, and then how those were decided.
Okay, thank you. What is you said focus room, you had the word reteach in there. What is reteach?
Reteaching and correcting your behavior. So thinking about how we interact, and so reteaching them the appropriate behaviors and expectations. So part of PBIS is, here are the expectations when you walk down the hallway, when you're in the cafeteria, when you're interacting with your peers, how you behave on the class, on the playground or wherever. But reteaching those skills that students need. So if there's a deficit and you're not understanding and you're touching everyone, getting up and moving out of your seat, following up with that student saying, here's the protocol, here's the process that we utilize in this classroom. Right. Remember when you probably were one of those students that never raised your hand when your teacher told you to raise your hand, you just probably said something automatically, right? Right. So reteaching. Scott, just a reminder, if you want to speak, would you please raise your hand?
Is there more than one kid in the focus room at a time?
Yes, there are multiple students, there could be multiple students in the focus room at one time.
How do you manage that?
The staff members manage it. I mean, and it's tough. Like I said, I go back to what Ms. Bruner stated. You know, it's tough right now when we think about the issues that COVID and especially our kindergarten and first grade students, we're seeing, pre-K through first grade, we're seeing a number of challenges with those students. And It is tough, and they're doing what they need to be doing to support students and support staff members. But it can be challenging, so and we're not discounting that. We get that, and that's why we want to make sure we have the right supports in place to support our campuses.
Okay. I have anything else?
Any other questions or comments from board members?
Yes, thank you for this update. This was a pleasant surprise. Can you send us this presentation so that I can look into it? And I might have some questions about some of the data on that. Is that okay if we all receive that?
Yes.
And then I can follow up with questions on that. But I will say something that you said, Mrs. Bruner, made me curious. You said a cautionary statement about looking at, well, some of those years were COVID, so those numbers would be low. It made me realize that I looked at those numbers and thought, it seems to me that if we're doing the right things that it seems to me clear that we're having more behavioral issues than ever. And it seems to me that if we are doing the right things to fix that, we should expect the numbers to go up. But ultimately, the numbers are just what they are. Like, I don't know that we can necessarily set an expectation and say they should be this or this. Like, the numbers are our reaction, hopefully consistently, to behavior. We can't control how much the kids are going to do what they're, going to come to school and do what they're going to do, and, the problems at home or whatever. But, we can just react consistently as need be with those consequences. So, all that said, I looked at that and thought, this might be good information that we are heading the right track, because I would expect to see them be higher. But what you just said almost seemed to kind of explain it away, like, oh, don't worry, it's too high. Remember, it's compared against COVID years. So, but I'm curious. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's why I'm saying I would like to give you the opportunity. Would you agree that it wouldn't be strange to see a rise in disciplinary statistics?
No, I wasn't surprised by what I saw, but the way the line graph went up so drastically, I think to somebody really not thinking about what that graph is telling us, it could be very alarming, and somebody might interpret it as, oh my Lord, it's just falling apart. No, I don't see it that way. I was just merely reminding people that low number kids were in school 2 days a week. That's all I was trying to do. I said in my statement, Board Member Byrne, that it's hard. It's hard right now, and it's harder than any time I've ever seen it. So the fact that number's gone up doesn't altogether surprise me based on what I know and what I've seen. I was just reminding people that if you think that's concerning, that there's that huge spike, and there would be some people that don't really understand that graph that might look at it and go, oh, my Lord, what's going on here? No, I'm just saying that really no number is not indicative. It's not a fair comparison. That's all I was saying.
Thank you. I just, my opinion, I would like to say, even take that a step further and say, if that number of 784 was double that, it wouldn't, like, that, I don't look at that and say, oh my gosh, what's going on here? I look at that and say, we're doing something different because this is our reaction. This isn't necessarily, you can't compare those years each year side by side and say, because there's 784 in 2023 and there was 571 in 2019, that just because of those numbers that the kids are acting worse in 2023 than they were in 2019, because this is just our reaction to it. This is just stuff that's OSS incidents, right?
Yes. OSS, yes.
So I guess I'm just saying, it seems to me that if we're doing the right things we need to do, that number would go up. And maybe next year it goes up even higher. And I don't think it's something that we should get concerned about. I think everyone should know that we're going to do what it takes, and it's going to be fair, and it's going to be equal. That number may go up, it may go down, but our goal is to improve, whatever the goal is, improve classroom, I'm going to butcher the language, but improve the classroom environment.
Right, but just to go to that though, as we look at those numbers, we also, part of our responsibility to say, okay, what's going on at this particular campus though, right? Or going on with this group of students. So what else do we need to do though to address those behaviors? And so that's part of the conversation as we're reviewing data. What else do we need to do to help staff? Because some of it also is understanding how staff interact with students, getting staff to understand consequences, but understand the process as it relates to progressive discipline. So you're right. It's more about, as we look at these numbers, what are we doing about it to make sure, though, that students behaviors are getting under control? Because we do need to say, okay, here's how you conduct yourselves. If you don't, this is the consequence of what happens. But as we think about, though, there are outside factors that can contribute to a student acting out or misbehaving, and we definitely need to also be able to get to the root cause of that. And so that's when we think about those various resources or opportunities where students need to be plugged in, whether it's counseling services or other types of support services.
Yeah, I just want to say that as a speech therapist who also works with kids with special needs, both with and without special needs, it would be problematic for me to see the number keep going up and up and up. While our response initially demonstrates this rise in response of higher number of out-of-school suspensions, when you're working with children, the goal is to not just continue to punish them, but to teach them new skills so that they don't have the same behaviors over and over again.
That's a reteach.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
I would hope to not see the number continue to go up and up and up, because I really do believe that in an educational setting, we're teaching kids the expectations for behaviors, and we should not continue to see the number go up and up and up.
But if I may, these aren't necessarily the same kids, or same students. Every year, 1/12 at least turns over. And as we've said, it sounds like our youngest grades are where we're experiencing some of the most problems. So
They are. I think
to some extent, it's out of our control. It depends on who lands in our buildings with whatever they may be dealing with, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, again, I've worked with kids also for a very, very long time, and the kids that we dealt with now are very different from the ones that, particularly at the younger grades, because they have very little social skills. They don't know how to do school. They've missed a lot of interactions. And so, yeah, we have to teach them. But we learn from our experience with these kids, and hopefully the next year we make adjustments so that we are not dealing with the same kind of things when they come in.
Any other board member comments?
I had a couple questions.
Oh, okay.
When you had detention and then you had detention noon or lunch, so students are going to detention after school still? Okay. And then that's one level below ISS. So you're not missing instruction time, you're in detention, and then the higher infraction would land you in ISS, and then it's OSS. And those numbers are 10+ days in OSS?
Yes, 10+
consecutive
days.
days. Okay. Thank you for that. So if I'm understanding this correctly, there's a difference between the student handbook and then there's a progressive discipline guide. And did I understand correctly that the student handbook trumps the progressive discipline guide?
Yes, at the end of the day, it's the
I got
student
that
handbook.
right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that's like the gold standard. Okay. And then, okay, so for our student handbook, at the very beginning of the scope and sequence, there's a disclaimer. I call it the disclaimer. That's not what it's called. It's, there is a range within, let's say, the first time there is this particular infraction. It could be detention, it could be conference detention or ISS, right? And then it's up to the building principal to decide where that falls with the least amount that would get the change in behavior. And that factors in limiting the instructional loss, but also the past history of the student. Is this the first time they ever got in trouble? All these things, right? I understand that. So there is a difference in how discipline is handed out based on all these factors, right? But we have directors or executive directors that are going to the buildings and reviewing these numbers with the principals, correct? Okay, I'm tracking so far. We're going to come across instances, I know because I hear of them, where the discipline was too tough or it was too easy, or that if there was an aggressor, I'm just using these terms, they're maybe not the right terms, but the aggressor and the victim, let's say there was a fight or there was inappropriate behavior, are both punished, where it doesn't, there's not an understanding on the part of the parents or on the part of the student. So when the directors and executive directors are in the buildings and they look at these, I assume that this is being documented, right? Because the principals are growing and learning, right? Can we see what that looks like?
What do you mean, can you
As a
see what it
board,
looks like?
can we see those results? Like, is everyone great, or are there growing pains? And how is that improving over time?
That's a personnel discussion.
Okay.
That's a personnel discussion.
That's fair. Can we see those results blinded? Not like Mr. Smith or Mr. Jones.
Let's talk about that.
In generality.
It's a personnel discussion.
I'll switch topics. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Raise your hand then, no.
Okay. I had a question, last question, but I do want to just take this time to make this comment. I'm also hearing that, I think it's great, like the attendance, tardies have gone up, and one of the results that came out of the discipline committee is that we need to be more consistent, right? And it needs to be entered. It can't just be on a slip of paper, with like the buses and all that. So that's great. However, it takes so much time to enter that infraction. There's all the steps that you have to take, which is taking away from the educator's time. And they're already, in training sessions and all the things that they have to do. I'm just hearing about this. Also, there's, on the back end, they have to deal with the parents. So I was speaking with a educator helper who said, I don't even write the students up anymore because it's such a hassle to have to go do it. And then guaranteed, I'm going to get a call from the parent because, every child is a special, precious orchid, and how could they have done something wrong? And so then I'm spending time on the phone defending my reasoning on why the student, got written up. I'm just going to use that phrase out there. I'm looking to come, I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can do to help in that regard, that we're going to continue investing in the administrative support, for lack of a better word, to deal with the parents, right? Because they may not understand. You understand what I'm saying?
Well,
that we are sticking with it, that we're being consistent, and that we're following this. Yeah, sure, they may have signed off on the handbook, but that we are providing the support to back up our teachers and our paraprofessionals and our bus aides and all of these people that we're standing up and saying, yes, we're standing firm.
We are, but I will also want to speak to a staff member telling you that they don't bother writing things up. We can't fix them and support them. When you make a choice as a staff member to say, I'm not going to write them up because I don't want to deal with the parents, you're saying essentially you're not going to do your responsibilities and your duties. And part of that job is if you're the person that's writing them up and going through that process.
I'm just saying it's become so cumbersome.
But that's part of the work. I mean, all of our work involves paperwork, it involves things, but if we want to improve student behaviors and we want a positive classroom environment and a safe and secure building and a facility that allows learning to take place, everyone has to do their part. And so, and that's part of the issue is everyone not doing their part of saying, okay, well, I don't want to document and put it into, that was part of the training this summer of ensuring, and over the past 2 years, especially going back to even the bus write-ups of putting it in the system. That if you want action and results, you've got to put it in so that we can go through the process to be able to help and support. Part of what happens on the campus or at a campus level is that support coming from the administrators to support that decision that was made, but they have to document the information.
Yeah, but when you have a bunch of students misbehaving and there's just no time, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that it is cumbersome, and the lack of adults required number. Yeah, the numbers went down in COVID because we had half the number of kids. Can we just go back to having really, really small classrooms? I mean, that would solve a
Well,
whole
then we'll
lot
have
of
to
problems.
reduce staff, and we'll have to
Right.
reduce compensation, or won't be.
So,
So
again,
it's
it
a
come- it
balance.
comes
People need to
back to
understand as it relates to
staffing.
our enrollment. But I want to go back to what you invest in and what you put your time in is how you get the return on your investment. And so people have to put in the time to do the paperwork and to put it in, because like I said, we're looking and making, especially now as we evaluate positions across the district, we're using this data to make decisions as we reduce all of the ESSER positions that we've added over the past several years to see which campuses needs support. Everyone will not receive the same level of support that they've received over the past 3 years based on those ESSER dollars. It was blanket, everyone
Get
received
even
something.
harder.
Right, it's going to be extremely hard. And so people need to understand, and we're using that discipline data, we're using attendance data, achievement data to make those decisions. And I think we shared with you, I know we did, in August, we talked to you about how we've tiered our schools, how we've tiered them academically, how we've tiered them around discipline. And so as we start making decisions, we're going to make decisions on those schools that are at the tier. So those tier 3 schools, the most challenging of campuses, will receive those additional resources or the needed resources beyond their basic allotment or basic FTE. So just kind of keep that in mind.
I only made that comment because I feel like we should be cognizant of that it can be cumbersome and challenging because time is a precious commodity. And so we just have to be cognizant of that. I just put it out there for whatever it's worth. Because I find it helpful to share this information with you.
I appreciate
and then you do what you can with it. It's off my plate and onto yours. Okay, last question. This is going to be a doozy. I don't know the exact wording, but I know that cell phones by policy are not permitted. So where are we with that? Like, what's happening with that?
So as it relates to, once again, reminding administrators and teachers that they follow the code of conduct. I know some of our schools have added an extra step or measure of students putting their cell phones in a pouch or a bag or keeping them in their lockers. So that they're out of sight completely, but the rule is that they are not to be utilized and using them. But like I said, we're going to put that back on. We need people enforcing that.
And so for the buildings or the classrooms that are doing that, are we finding that is helpful? What kind of feedback are you getting?
Positive feedback. Definitely, Sheila said,
so that's high school level.
That's
if you're
high
talking
school,
to
right,
her.
right.
Oh, that's high school. We've had 91 visits, and I will tell you, out of the 91 visits, I bet I've seen 6 earpods or phones, probably 6 to 8 total, and they would put them away when we walk in.
And so that would be compared to, let's say, last year.
That's in 91 classrooms that I've been in. So all of our high schools have, it's through PBIS, so it's through those systems.
So this is a dramatic decrease in students with, okay.
Engaged, so, yeah. So it's good.
Thank
It's very
you.
exciting, and teachers are really excited, so they're able to do that because everyone in the building is doing that. That's the expectation. We've had class meetings, the communication is very clear on what the expectations, parents are aware, and parents are very excited too.
Okay.
So
When everybody's
they're
doing it,
excited
it's
that
easier,
if you can
right?
do it at school, you might be able to do it at home.
Right,
So,
right.
that's a
Well,
good thing.
because, the students have like 7 different classes, 7 different bosses. It's harder to say, well, I can have it out in Mr. Jones's class, but not in Mrs. Smith's. So, but when everybody's on the same page, it's a lot easier.
Yes, and that makes it easier for teachers too, so it's not just them.
Is this holding true with middle school and elementary?
I can't speak to
I
that.
know, I was
just
talking
speak
to
to
Dr.
the high
Lathan.
schools.
Okay, middle school, yes.
Same thing at the middle school, and that, this year in particular, we've got a universal, across all sites. During instructional time, the phones are not out at any of our 10 middle school K-8 buildings. We have maybe different, like a couple of buildings have at lunchtime, they're allowed to have it out or in the hallway, but during instructional time.
When you say
phones-
instructional time, is that class time?
Class time.
Okay.
Class time.
Oh, so even if,
Walk into a class,
even
you
if
should never
after
see a
instruction's over and they're supposed to be doing their work, not allowed, right?
No
Okay.
phones, yep, no
Okay.
phones in classrooms.
That wasn't a doozy. Thank you, board members.
Thank you, Dr. Lathan. I think we all appreciate the update very much. Okay, that moves us to our agenda item 13.01, board comments. Are there any board members who wish to make a comment at this time?
I had the pleasure of attending the Principals for a Day luncheon debriefing. It was an amazing event. There were, I don't know how many people in the room who all had the opportunity to visit one of our campuses and to join forces with principals at our schools to experience what it's like to be a principal in SPS. These were people in our community from different industries and work backgrounds, and the feedback was what was most amazing. Hearing, business owners and hearing a city council member and hearing people who work for corporations and those who work for small businesses talk about their experiences in the school and their ability to see and learn and experience for themselves what it is that is happening in our classrooms. And it was a pleasure even to hear some of them saw the good, the bad, and the ugly, but even in the bad, they were impressed with how the administration of the school were dealing with issues and how full the day of the principals are, and being able to see some of the needs. There were opportunities for some of these community members to provide job opportunities for some of our students. There was opportunities for mentorship to happen. It was just an amazing experience. I think I give kudos to Dr. Lathan for creating this opportunity for our community to join in with our school district, because I think it's an important collaboration, it's an important relationship, and it's going to, I think, pay off dividends. So kudos.
Yes, Board Member Christ.
Follow up with you, Dr. Thomas Tate. Went on the community leadership visit to Tulsa, and I heard the same comments because there were a lot of people on that visit who went to that, the same thing, that the principal for a day. So great comments there, great feedback, and great respect all around the tables for Dr. Latham. Thank you. Really appreciate that. So well thought of throughout the community. So one thing I also want to mention is that November 2nd to the 4th, we have the MSBA conference up in Kansas City that most of us are attending. Is everybody attending here? That's great, excellent. So it starts Thursday evening and then goes into Friday and Saturday with general sessions, conferences, and workshops. That's a great way also to network as well, and to bond within our group as well. So we're looking forward to that. And the delegates are getting together during that meeting as well. We have 3 delegates. It'll be Sharita Mahamakhani, right? Mm-hmm. And myself. And,
I thought it was Ms.
And where we'll be voting on, advocacy proposals on advocacy positions from the MSBA, as well as other things. So we're really looking forward to that in a couple weeks. That's all I have.
Any other board comments?
I'm going to add on to what Board Member Thomas Tate said in regard to the principal for a day. I laughed. I got tears on my eyes. I left the room inspired to do even better. There are, I consider it a true privilege to serve on this board and to serve the community in yet another capacity. And having that kind of an opportunity, I will say, and this was said publicly, so a student from Studi was offered a job at $29 an hour, and he was graduating in 2 weeks. The gentleman that was over there as principal for the day said, "Would you like to come work for us at $29 an hour?" And he was working at a local pizza parlor. And so, he took the chance, and the employer was willing to take a chance on this young man, and I hope it works out well. Another wonderful event that I had the opportunity to attend was the Hall of Fame reception and then the luncheon. That too was an incredible, and as a native Springfieldian, there were people being honored that I'd been familiar with over the years, some that I knew, one young man that I actually had as a student when he went to Pershing Junior High at that time. But it's very heartwarming to hear people, these adults that are being honored for their accomplishments, reflect on their time in Springfield Public Schools and kind of tell their story. And there was a mixed bag, because some of the recipients of this honor talked about how they were not necessarily the ideal students, and they kind of told on themselves of some shenanigans that they pulled, which I thought was interesting. One young man even talked about his father, that I guess, how was it he put it, creative writing that he did on the side of a building one day, and his father was being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And so his parting remark, which I thought was just hysterical, this was one of the Daredevils' sons, and he said, for the students in the room, if you ever get creative in terms of writing on a school building, just know that one of these days you may be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So I thought that was kind of funny. But at any rate, it's very uplifting and wonderful to have those opportunities to participate in the community in those ways. I was so impressed tonight, and I love starting our school board meetings with honoring excellence. And it was, I can't name, I've known Mr. Davis now for many, many years, but all of the educators, the employees that were honored tonight, I think that sends a positive message. They are what holds us all together. They are the glue. And I'm excited that we have those kinds of educators and support staff that continue to give and go above and beyond and make Springfield Public Schools the very best it can be. I think that's probably takes it to what I wanted to say, but I do appreciate, Dr. Lathan, what you have brought to our district in terms of the principal for the day. You were very honest with the community leaders when you said, when you first piloted this with a few principals, everybody went, okay, and then you said the next year now everyone's doing it, and it kind of sucked the air out of the room for a bit. But those kinds of opportunities win the business community in. We all are in this together, and I was proud to be there that day. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments at this time?
Just one more thing, several of us were able to attend Pause to the Polls at Missouri State, and it was a pleasure to engage with students who are interested in local elected officials and what's going on in the world, and seeing them engaged in voting. And I know that there were a number of people who's registered to vote, and it's always really great to see young people get involved.
On that note, I'll be sending you an email about a student who just started, who's interested in the Grow Your Own program.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, is it too late?
No, it's never too late.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say that for the money, but for next semester, I'm sure we can work something.
And did a lot of messaging, and they're going to be advertising this. Just for whatever reason, we had a lot of students from the education department.
Wonderful.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
really did.
Please send me
Definitely.
that.
I'll send that name to you.
Definitely interested. Good talk to you.
Okay. So upcoming meetings, our next board meeting is November 14th, which will be a study session, and then November 28th, which will be a regular meeting. And as Vice President Kreis mentioned, I think most, if not all of us, will also be attending the MSBA meeting up in Kansas City to further our education. Okay. At this time, I will entertain a motion that the board adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Motion from Member Thomas Tate. Do I have a second? Second from Board Member Bruner. This time we'll vote. We can take a verbal vote. Yep, Board Member Bruner.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes